Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dr. Finance Live Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Anthony Criniti IV, also known as Dr. Finance. And we were here with an amazing guest today, folks, Dr. Denis Waitley. Dr. Denis Waitley is a New York Times best-selling author, one of the top speakers in the world. The credibility of Dr. Denis is so immense. I'm going to leave the floor to him to tell us about himself, but in just a moment. So first, let's give a warm welcome. Welcome, Dr. Denis. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm great. It's great to be with you. We like to talk before, and sometimes I'm roadkill on the information highway, but I'm glad we got the technical stuff worked out. I'm excited to be with you and really hope to share some great information back and forth.
Thank you, Dr. Denis. And folks, just to give you a kind of a little background to our podcast today. We were actually working out technical glitches for about an hour. But we got through it. We're here, and I'm just really happy to be here with Dr. Denis. He's one of my favorite speakers. Just met him recently, but I got to say, he's definitely, the more I listen to his interviews and whatnot, I mean, he's just an incredible person. He was on Clubhouse last week, I believe. Yeah, no, 2 weeks ago. And unbelievable turnout, and I appreciate you being here, Dr. Denis, for Clubhouse too. It's a great night. I actually got a lot of messages afterwards telling about how many they said their lives have changed because of you. So that's a great feedback when I hear that.
Well, I appreciate that a lot. And Clubhouse is good for me because I have a great face for audio. So I had a young man say to me, "You're a lot older than your voice." And I said, "No, my voice is younger than I am." I said, I've gone to voice fitness training, but my body has been withering away in the meantime. But what's interesting is I've been around in this business for a long time, 55 years on the platform. And my contemporaries, Earl Nightingale is the one who found me. And he's been my main mentor. He called me in Florida many years ago and said, "Kid, you got a pretty good voice. You got good stuff. If you're ever in Chicago, you should see my partner, Lloyd Conant." At that moment in time, which was 1976, there was only his Strangest Secret audio record, and there was an album called Lead the Field by Earl Nightingale. And that is the only audio speaking that ever took place at the time. Incidentally, since we went live and you and I had our technical things, I have to turn off my phone now, which just rang during the middle of it, which shows that we're live, which is great. So at the time that Earl Nightingale discovered me, there was only one audio album in the world, his, Lead the Field. A little company down in Waco, Texas called Success Motivation Institute also began to record. But my album in 1978 was the second only spoken voice audio album in the world. In other words, nobody had recorded speaking on audio, not even pastors. So audio tape was brand new in the 1970s. And I was lucky to get down on the bottom floor to have the second album ever produced to speak. And it just happened to hit because they wanted to build a mailing list. Earl Nightingale was not well at the time. So I'm an understudy for Earl Nightingale. Nobody knows me, never had anybody call me. And Zig Ziglar and I gave 500 speeches before anyone would pay us. So when you look back, you've got Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Norman Vincent Peale, Paul Harvey, Art Linkletter, and you've got some of the early pioneers in the field. And now I'm the only early pioneer alive. And the rest of now there's the next generation with Brian Tracy, Mark Victor Hansen. You've got all the second, now there's a third generation. And so I'm kind of like a granddaddy of the self-help movement from the old days where you had audio albums and Amway, Shackley, Mary Kay, Avon, all the big networking companies came. But I had the good fortune And I can call you Anthony, but I like to call you Dr. Finance, both. But I have
My
the
friends
good
call me
fortune-
Tony. You can
Yeah.
definitely call me Tony.
I'm one of the
I'm
few
honored.
guys who has been able to ride both sides of the aisle. In other words, I've been able to do direct marketing with entrepreneurs, but also be hired by Microsoft, Apple, General Electric, Bank of America, Mercedes. So all the big companies in the world, because I'm not a rah-rah speaker, I'm more a cerebral speaker, they're able to bring me into all their corporate people because I don't sell from the platform. So I've never held up one item, never a book, never audios, never a mastermind, never my boot camp, never my upsell, no funnels. So my whole career for 55 years has never been me talking about what I have to offer. It's only the content that I present. And then, like my peers have said, Earl Nightingale, Norman Vincent Peale, or Robert Schuller, or Stephen Covey, all of those guys said, Dennis, you either are a teacher or a salesman. And if you're a salesman, they know that the bottom line is you're trying to make money. But if you're a teacher, then the bottom line is I truly want to help people succeed without necessarily having to get a quid pro quo in return. It's worked for me. I like doing that. I don't like to sell myself. I like to be just like everybody else, come out of the audience and say, hey, I'm like you. So I don't talk about all the successes that I've had. I talk about all the resilience and the struggles that we all go through. But that's the short side of it. I'm an ex-Naval Academy, Annapolis carrier-based jet pilot during the Korean Wars. And during my boyhood, I was raised during World War II. So all I knew as a boy was we were always going to be at war. And then I graduated from high school, and sure enough, North Korea invaded South Korea. So they drafted everyone my age. So I ran for the Naval Academy so I could at least have 4 years and then become a pilot and not get killed right away. I thought I might get killed a little later, but not immediately. So I headed for the opposite of West Point, the Naval Academy, and stayed in for 9 years as a carrier-based pilot. But there I am. I mean, I'm out of the Navy at 27 or 28. I hadn't a clue about anything you could do. I thought I'd have to be a defense contractor or airline pilot. And so this was always a hobby. This was always something that you do because it's your passion, not your pension. Your passion is what you love to do during your free time. You do it for food. You do it just for a peanut butter sandwich. You just do it. But I never thought there was a career there. But I just kept on doing what Zig did. Zig was selling pots and pans and sandwiches. And he always said, they said, so are you a good salesman? He said, yeah, I sold my car, I sold my furniture, had to sell my house before I could ever make money in the business. So I've got a history that goes way back, and I've been very lucky to be discovered at a time when there was no market other than one that was created by direct marketing. So Nightingale Conant sent out 500,000 4-color brochures with a letter from Earl Nightingale, the only guy that was in motivation at the time, except for Paul J. Meyer, who was down at Waco, Texas with Success Motivation Institute. And if you go way back to the early 70s, late 60s, you'll find that Earl had he did in 1956, he did no, maybe it was 65, I don't know. But the strangest secret, I heard that when I was maybe 22 years old. And then finally to have him call me when I was 40 and say, hey, kid. And I said, well, I'm not a kid anymore. It's just taken me a long time to get somebody to pay me $125 to speak. And Anthony or Dr. Finance, Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar and I all started out at no pay for talks. Lions Club, Rotary, Optimist, Women's, anyone who would hear us for free we would speak. And then we would have a little Sony mic and a little Sony recorder, and we'd record each talk, and we'd use that as our audition. But finally, we used we had a little cassette recorder, and then we had a cassette duplicator, and we would duplicate the cassettes at the Rotary meeting and sell them for $5 each so that we could pay for the meal that we went there. And it wasn't, so every year I went from 175 to 250 a speech, and Zig went to 400, and he finally got to 500 a talk after 2.5 years. And I said, wow, you mean somebody going to pay you $500? Attorneys only get 100 an hour, and you're getting 500. And then he went to 1,000. I went to 500. Then he went to 1,500. And so Zig worked his way up to 5,000. And then all the books and albums hit, and Amway and Mary Kay and Shackley and Avon and all the big direct marketing companies came in and started buying the tapes. And Zig would sell $50,000 worth of tapes at one meeting, and then $100,000 worth. And he became the headliner, and Jim Rohn went with Herbalife and became the spokesperson for Herbalife, and they gave him stock and $1 million a year. And then he started selling. So this business has been kind of bootstrapped up, where you're lucky to be paid for a speech. And now, of course, if you're a best-selling author but can't speak, you can still get $25,000 to $30,000 a talk if you can force yourself up into the mindset, have been on television, have a giant podcast. And I'm not suggesting that anybody who's podcasting is not as capable and smart and good as we are. But we had to stair step up from $100 on up. And it took 10 years for me to get to $1,000 a speech. And then I went from 1,000 to 5 to 10 to 20 to 30. And 30 was the most I ever received for a talk. And I felt that I was a drug dealer. But I was selling endorphins rather than morphine.
That is funny. All right. That is an awesome, awesome story, Dr. Denis. I want to get a little bit more into the story, though, before we get into the questions. And I have lots of questions for you today. A lot of them came from Clubhouse. I've added a few more since that event because I've just been thinking about a lot of things you said in depth, and it makes so much sense. So about 20 to 25 questions, maybe 2 minutes each. And we'll just add a little bit more to your story here, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so great. So I'd like to, like you told us the summary, I'd like to dive deep a little bit more in your childhood and just try to understand that process, how it led to where you are today. Because you told the story briefly on Clubhouse, and I know that you had it hard. You grew up hard, and tough. And my belief is that a lot of people who are great like yourself or become great have started had some kind of difficulty, some kind of major struggle, especially early on, that built them. And I actually want to quote you. I'm going to quote wrong, so I'm going to call it paraphrasing. In one of your interviews I heard the other day, you said success. You said failure is the fertilizer to success. Something like that. Right?
Yeah, that's what I believe. I believe that failure is fertilizer. Doesn't smell good. You don't want to roll in it because it clings to you if you roll in it. What you want to do is sprinkle it on the next crop, and it grows green crop if you don't roll in your failure. A failure is an event, not a person. And I've learned I've had a lot of failing events, but I don't feel I'm a failure, but I have failed. So just the thumbnail sketches, like many people, I was raised during it. Our house was $11,000. My dad, biggest paycheck ever was $200 a month. I always thought $1,000 a month would be the absolute most. The most expensive house in San Diego was $46,000 when I was a boy. So we didn't know there was rich and poor. We just thought everyone lived in scaled houses. So my mother and father argued. He drank a little bit, and he smoked and drank, and he was a great guy, wonderful man, did a lot for me. My mother was negative and bitter. He left and went into World War II. When he came back, they were divorced. I was the man of the family at 9. He left when I was 9, and he said goodbye instead of good night. So growing up, we didn't have any money. My mother was negative. She never said a positive word throughout my whole life. She never read any of my books. She thought that I should have gotten a job rather than doing what I did. My dad was disappointed I didn't stay in the Navy and become an admiral, because I would have had a pension. And he said, a pension is what you need. That's why you should be in the military. You serve for 30 years and you get a flag and dental work and you get buried in Arlington Cemetery. They take care of you. So I had a mentality, and also my mother sent me to school when I was 4. So I was a year, she lied about my age. So I graduated from high school on my 16th birthday, which meant that I was the peewee, the younger, the dating the junior high girls in high school. The high school girls were dating the college guys. So I was too young, too small, only in baseball, and I had low self-esteem. And here's the, I have an interesting thing. I have a guy looking over, what am I seeing? It's really interesting. I like that.
I'm here, Dr. Dennis. Sorry about that.
No, I like that.
I'm listening.
No, I like the man looking over the rail there.
Oh, this? You like that? That's Philadelphia in the background. That's me.
I like that. I like that. Well, let me just close that part of it just by saying that. So my ears were this size when I was 14, and there was a movie that came out when I was 10 called Dumbo. So in high school, I was Dumbo Waitley, the peewee baseball player, straight A student. And here's what speakers do. Because we have low self-esteem growing up, and we need to be appreciated and approved, what we have to do is get somebody else to say we're okay. So the applause that we get, it makes up for what we didn't have growing up, which was encouragement, role models, mentors. So I have a feeling that we're hungry for approval, and that we become speakers and actors, actresses, singers, so that an audience will say that we're okay. That's part of it. So part of it is overcoming the childhood feelings of unworthiness. I had that. And then going to the Naval Academy, becoming a pilot. I was a good pilot, but not a great pilot. I mean, I was pretty good reflexes, but I didn't want to kill people. Every time I blew up a bridge, I made sure there was nobody on it or under it. And they said, you can't do that. They'll shoot you up. They'll shoot you down with a shoulder firing missile. Mm-hmm. So that's the boyhood was, I rode my bike 10 miles one way to my grandmother's house. And there it was. There was the mentor, role model. There was the encourager. Here he comes, Mr. Lawnmower. Boy, you mow the greatest lawn, and oh, you do, what a good boy you are. And I said, Grandma, will the Japanese win? She said, no, it goes full circle. You plant the seeds, you nurture them, and they come up the way you plant them. Weeds don't need watering. You'll find out. And I said, why won't the Japanese win? They bombed Pearl Harbor and they're ready to bomb San Diego. And she said, no, you know, it always goes full circle. You become what you do, and you'll find that sowing and reaping, just like we're planting this garden. And I said, Grandma, it takes so much effort to pull the weeds out because they don't need watering. She said, you'll find that out in life. But she said, we're planting the seeds of greatness here. She said, I want you to model your life after people who are servant leaders rather than status seekers. I said, what is a servant leader? She said, one who gives more in value than they receive in payment. And then you're sought after for the good work that you give other people. So serving other people is not humble. Well, it is humble, but it's not humiliation. It's humility. It's graciousness. It's being a person who really, truly wants to help other people, make the world better. Do you understand that? And I said, Well, sort of, I guess, yeah, I do. Yeah, but it would be fun to be a movie star, though. You know, it would be fun to be somebody important, she said, but not as important as being somebody who people would love for what they do, right? I said, yes, that's why I love you, Grandma. And she said, well, that's why I love you. And she said, you got great potential. Never forget that. You've got an uncut diamond inside you that just needs cutting and polishing. And there it was, you know, seeds of greatness, 9-year-old, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That was my anchor, the role model. And I've written about her in Seeds of Greatness, which Seeds of Greatness, incidentally, was sold more copies of any book that I ever published. So it was a New York Times bestseller, along with Being the Best. The Psychology of Winning, though, became the best-selling audio album of all time. That's my elevator talk. They'd say, you know, I don't know who you are. I've never seen you. You're not on TV. I don't know your name. What are you famous for? And I said, Nightingale Conant sold more albums than any other album of anyone who talks. So I said they made $100 million on an album, and I got a check for $20,000 a month for 15 years on one album that was a fluke that happened because they needed a mailing list, and Earl Nightingale was sick. And because of that, I was discovered. I said, I can't tell you any more than that. So I'm a very fortunate person to have intersected the opportunity with the desire and the practice. So I had a lot of practice as a boy, a lot of practice speaking, trying to become relevant, saying things that were important to other people, telling the story for them, not my story for me. So I always want to keep the reader and the listener and the watcher in mind. I don't want to talk about myself in terms of how I did it, because I wrote The Psychology of Winning when I was losing. So my best work happened at my worst of times, which is the primary message of talking to you, because resiliency is really the key. The failure fertilizer analogy probably is more important than any other advice you could ever give anyone, because when things are at their worst, you bring out your A game. And if you don't, you cave, you crumble, you're stunned, you're dancing on peanut butter. You can't move forward because fear has gripped you, and they tell you what to do, and they tell you what you have to do, and they frighten you. And you're so frightened that if you make a move forward, sideward, that you'll be doing the wrong thing. So resiliency is the ability to bounce back. And during COVID or any other time in life, boy, when COVID came out, my antenna went up, and I'm at that age, and with the health issues, I'm the perfect candidate for COVID. You know, in my 80s, a little heart, a little lung, a little this, a little cancer here, a little immune system down, old. I'm the one that needs to be concerned about COVID the most. So what do? I make sure my A game is at the best. My senses are heightened. Am I alarmed? No, only enough to be totally aware. What do I need to do? What's the next good step? What should I be listening for? What would be the answer to this? So I already had the monoclonal antibodies, and I already had the things that you take for good therapy. I already knew that I shouldn't be on a ventilator. I already knew that if I was hospitalized, I'd have to go here. And I began to make my plans. What if then? And I got myself in a position where instead of saying, oh my God, I hope I don't get COVID, I'm saying, okay, I don't want to get it. I don't expect to get it. But if I do, here's what I'm going to do. I want to be ready. And I think being aware of what's around you, being aware of opportunity, being aware of limitations, being aware of strengths and weaknesses, then the awareness factor gives you the ability to be resilient. And resiliency means every day there's going to be something come in your garden that's going to be full of weeds. So a garden full of weeds is automatic. You never get it right. If it isn't for insects or the drought, it's too much rain. And just when you get the garden perfect, the hose doesn't work. And so you can't irrigate it. So there's always something every day to make life a roller coaster that requires resiliency. And resiliency means, okay, I didn't see that coming. I didn't anticipate that, but I'm glad I didn't make assumptions, because had I assumed that things would be different, I would have assumed 50% wrong. And so this is one of my things I've learned in my life. I never make assumptions of any kind about anybody anymore. I let them, by questioning them, tell me where they're coming from, what their hot buttons are, what they like, what they don't like, because I don't want to present my case before I know the environment I'm going in. It's just a way of being resilient and trying not to walk in without knowing what I'm going into a little bit. So I'm a lot more aware at age 88 than most 88-year-olds would be, because I want to live to be 100. My mom lived to be 97 and she was negative every day. She was in bed, she was negative, she listened to negative talk radio, she was overweight, she criticized everything, and she lived to be 97. Why? Because she wrote in her journal every day everything that was wrong with the world, and she was seeking justice. Okay, justice and revenge is a why. So she had a big why in life. My why is just the opposite from hers. I want to plant a shade tree under which I'll never sit. I want to help a young kid that believes that he or she can make it but has no avenue. And then I do a passion project. I say, if it weren't for time, money, or circumstance, what would you do? And they say, well, I said, no. If money were not an object and time was okay and circumstances allowed, what would you start doing? They said, well, of course I'd do this. And I said, well, let's go. And they said, no, you can't just say that. No, I said, you have to be doing what you're going to be doing now in some way. You can't put it on layaway. You cannot put the future on layaway. You must be doing your future within while you're doing without. You have to be dress rehearsed in order to get opening night. You got to be ready and be aware. So that's, if you were to say, what is it that I teach? Awareness of being in the moment and not living for the moment.
Thank you, Dr. Denis. So, Dr. Denis, before we get into the questions, I just want to clarify. So you were born in San Diego, California, and you live still in California, is that correct?
Yep, I still live, my whole family still lives close to where I was born.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, all my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandchildren. So I have great-grandchildren that think that tapes are what you wrap around your finger and your ankle. They never thought you could listen to a tape, and they don't know what a CD is. They think it's a certificate of deposit. And they don't know what an MP3 or an MP4 is because they only stream, but they don't know what streaming is because they only have to turn their smartphone on and magic. It comes from all over the world. So they don't have to go through those little steps that we used to go through before.
And the irony of it, those steps starting from the CD, I mean, ignoring the tape for a second, starting from the CD, that was just the 90s. I mean, that's not that long ago, 25 years.
I know. And then you had an eight. First you had the vinyl record. First you had the regular vinyl. Then you got the long play vinyl. Then you got the 45 on the spindle that dropped them down. Then finally you got audio, audio 6, 8-track, you stick that. I had a boat that had an 8-track audio cassette in it, and no one wanted to go on the boat because they said if the boat is that old, we're not sure it's seaworthy because you have an 8-track tape recorder in your boat.
That's funny. So Dr. Denis, as far as your books, we're going to get into your books in just a second, but your books that you had, you said that the audio track that sold for 100 million, The Psychology of Winning, that was the second audio produced speaker of all time.
Yes.
Right after Earl Nightingale. So was that on a record speaking of records, or was that a tape cassette at the time?
No, it was a tape cassette. In that it was, it took me 2 years to convince Earl's company to record me. So it wasn't that he said, if you're ever in Chicago, see my partner. So these things don't happen overnight. So he called me in 1976, and it took me 2 years to convince them to let me record an album. They wanted to interview me because they thought since I was unknown, I wouldn't be able to pull an audience. But then Earl said that he would be willing to do the introduction and also do the 4-color brochure that they sent out to everyone in MasterCard. And so they just sent it to hundreds of thousands of people. So I'm a product of direct marketing. So it sold, it was $50 an album. So it had 6 cassettes in it. So we went straight from the first albums were all 6 tapes, because that way you could sell them for $50 and you could get a return. You could never sell a single tape for that. You'd have to be like Zig and I and sell them for $5 or $10 a piece, and it just wasn't profitable that way.
Okay, so all right, so you have, this is what I find interesting. Earl Nightingale, you said, made his cassettes like probably 20 years before you. So there's like this 20-year gap between the number one, the first guy who did it, and then the second guy who did it. Is that right?
That's right. And,
Wow.
and then you got Paul Meyer down in Waco, who had SMI, Success Motivation Institute. And he was the second. So Earl came out with Lead the Field, and he did Lead the Field for Chevrolet, Lead the Field for Standard Oil. So every big company was buying the Earl Nightingale 6 cassette album, which came after his vinyl, after his vinyl record. So The Strangest Secret, of course, is on audio tape, and it's also on CD and also on YouTube, so people can listen. And I strongly suggest that, because just like Rhonda Byrne's video, The Secret, and her book, The Secret, The Strangest Secret is still one of the most powerful, profound statements of fact, that we become what we think about most of the time. So people do become that to which they're most exposed, which is why when Charlie Tremendous Jones said, the books you read, the people you meet, the things you hear, the things you watch, you learn by observation, imitation, and repetition. And we all hook on to things and we repeat. And I've got a whole story about why people put their arms up on a roller coaster, and why they jump up and down at rock concerts, and why all the college students jump up and down the stands, because they saw somebody else do it. That's why they do it, because it's the thing to do. My daughter's just waving at me.
Hi. Okay, so we're going to move into your books, Dr. Denis. Let's talk about just a quick summary of your books, and then we're going to talk about the psychology of winning in just a second. But basically, like maybe 30 seconds, just a quick summary of your works, your books that you have.
Well,
I'm sorry. Before I forget, Dr. Denis, that's why I got sidetracked with the tech issues earlier. Folks, check this out. The first book, I'm actually a co-author with Dr. Denis.
That's right.
Look at that. Dr. Denis Waitley, The 13 Steps to Riches. It's a 13 series. This is volume 1. Dr. Denis Waitley is here. He is part of a tribe of 13 amazing celebrity authors. And this is honoring Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. He actually had in his book 13 Steps to Riches. And Dr. Denis did the first one, which is on desire. See, desire. So I'm honored to be a co-author in this amazing book, Dr. Denis. I just want
I am too. I am with you as well. For to me, it's always an honor. So I never feel, and here's again the first take. I'm as good as the best, but no better than the rest. So I've never met anyone less important than I am in the world. But at the same time, I don't think that just because you're a celebrity or rich or powerful that you're better than anyone else. So my gardener is a horticulturist. My driver is a transportation manager, and a waitress is a food service manager. Straight across, selling 10 to 10 not 10 to 8, 10 to 5, not down, no hierarchy with me. It's straight across with everyone. And by living that way, you don't let your ego get away, but you also don't beat yourself up. You say, hey, that's not like you. You're better than that, Dennis. Come on, let's get going. So in terms of the books, The Psychology of Winning, I wrote while I was losing for myself. So I wrote a diary for me about what I wasn't doing. And then I read it over and said, you're not doing any of these things, which is why you're losing. And so if you were doing these things, you wouldn't be losing. So I took all these traits, these 10 traits of what I thought was a winner, put them in a manuscript, shoved it in the drawer and say, you're not good enough to be published. Why? I wasn't good enough to be an author. I was good enough to be a writer, but not good enough to be an author. They're two different things. An author must be worthy of being published. So it sat in the drawer, it sat there. And it wasn't until I started recording little tapes and selling them for $5 that I got a tape called The Psychology of Winning. Earl Nightingale heard the little tape. It took 2 years to get that. The album came out first, but then it was the book. So the album was what the thing that hit. The book sold quite a few, but it got me another book contract for The Seeds of Greatness. So The Seeds of Greatness was the first major book. It was both Christian and secular, which meant it crossed over. It was the best-selling Christian book in 1985, I think, and one of the best-selling other books, along with 1 Minute Manager and In Search of Excellence and books like that. So Seeds of Greatness was probably sold more copies than any other book that I wrote. So it was a Times bestseller. Then Nightingale Conant did the album. Then I did Being the Best. That became a New York Times bestseller. So I went Seeds of Greatness, Being the Best, and then I wrote one book every 2 years for the next 20 years. So I've ended up writing 20 books, but Brian Tracy's written 95. So I mean, it's not like I'm just author with everything. I just wrote a book every 2 years. Some people write a book every month, and Patterson writes a book, every week. But so Seeds of Psychology of Winning, Seeds of Greatness, Being the Best, Timing is Everything, The New Dynamics of Winning, Safari of the Soul, Empires of the Mind. The books kept coming out, and only 3 of the 20 have been New York Times bestseller. So it's not like I have one big hit after another. Tony, and I call you Anthony, it's probably Dr. Finance. It's probably the same book with a different title and a different cover and a different slant. But inside of each human, we have a story. And the story is told in different metaphors in different ways, but it's probably the one big story is you can overcome almost any setback with belief in yourself and this type of attitude and the persistence and the awareness and the never giving up attitude, no matter how many times you fail. That's really the sequence of all the books. And I think the latest book, The New Psychology of Winning, took 43 years to do a sequel. So that would be like Rocky II, 43 with Sylvester Stallone being an old man reflecting on Rocky I. So The New Psychology of Winning is simply the psychology of winning brought into the digital age with everything I've learned in between, so that it's principles that never change, but an environment, market, and a delivery system that has changed entirely. And also a mindset about what success is, because success today is a little more superficial, I have to tell you. It's a little more on the get rich quick, a little less on the self-awareness and the deepness. And people are not as willing to dive deep and spend as much time, read as long. They'd like to get an app, a success app. And if they could get a success app on their smartphone, I think, and if they could get a 10-minute formula where they could go on a weekend retreat and become wealthy by the information they got from the weekend, they'd be satisfied. But it's not as easy today to get people to dive deep into their limitations, their strengths, where they've been, where they are, where they want to go, and be specific with focus. It's not as easy today because, wow, there's so much opportunity and so much noise. There's just so much noise, and you have to pierce that noise and be recognized by an audience, and you have to be out there. And I think you have to be a lot better, a lot smarter, and a lot more relevant than, I mean, there were only a few of us in the 70s. I mean, it was a new industry. The self-development industry was new. We were doing big rallies, the success rallies, and there would be thousands, 10,000 people paying $100 to come and hear Zig and Jim Rohn and Earl Nightingale, Norman Vincent Peale, Robert Schuller, wow, John Maxwell, you know, Les Brown, all of the speakers. And we would lay on our bed in the hotel room, and there'd be, you know, $50, $100, $200, and we'd be doing snow angels on our bed with, we actually did feel like, what are we selling here? Why are people buying this? They were all hungry for, how do you turn desire into focus and into reality? And do you just get lucky, or is luck laboring under correct knowledge? L-U-C-K. Is it just happenstance, or right place, right time, or is there something more? And of course there is. It's both desire, content, value, integrity, resilience, persistence. It's all those things put into one. So those are the books, and I don't like to talk about them because, you know, people discover them. You don't know how many people have found them in a Goodwill for 50 cents. Or one guy on a podcast said that he found one in the dumpster. And I said, oh, you mean somebody threw it away and you happened to pull it out of a dumpster in order to get the value that I was giving? I took a deep breath and said, okay, there's value even in trash.
I've had friends that said they read my book in the bathroom, so don't feel bad. Well, thank you.
I can give you some shorter answers that will, what I hope will benefit the audience with some really, I hope I can give them some take-home value just based on the number of mistakes I've made.
No, this is perfect, Dr. Dennis. We're setting the foundation here. So just to sum up, so you have 20 books. That includes the books that you have co-authored as well. Is that right?
Yes. No, those are additional.
Oh, okay.
So I have 20 books that I've written by myself, only by myself, and then I have some ones that are co-authored.
How many would you say that would be total?
Maybe 10 co-authored.
Books like the 13 steps, pretty much, right?
Or ones that I've co-authored with just one person.
Oh, okay.
So me and a futurist, or me and an economist, or me and somebody more important than me.
Well, I like that New Psychology of Winning book, and Dora Evans said she was talking really good about it. She had, I believe, she gave a testimonial for that, and I like the idea where you're going with this. You reflected on your original book many years later. I think it's really good that you did that. When did that come out?
I've learned a lot too since the original. I've learned that winning is more of an interdependency thing, and it's very individual, but you still have to have a team. You know, you don't do it alone, that's for sure. And so we do know that we're all networking. Unless you're networking, you're not working. Unless you're online, you'll be in the breadline. And unless you're able to reach an audience and use that smartphone as your global library and really research things, and don't take things that are Googled as being true. They're opinions. So Google is full of opinions, and it's really hard to get the facts. You know, truth is something that is highly opinionated these days. So I always try to check the source. I always try to say, instead of I hear that, or they say that, or I read on the internet that, I know those are opinions. And so I try to go back and say, who said it originally? And is it dispensed like aspirin? In other words, can you get it, or is it something that is a little too woo-woo? Woo-woo means just a little bit, maybe on the cutting edge where it's not readily available to everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. All right, Dr. Dennis, we're going to move forward with our questions now. So figure about 1 to 2 minutes each. So obviously you mentioned this new book now called The New Psychology of Winning. What has attracted you to spend so much time studying the subject of winning?
Because I was had low self-esteem and liked athletics a lot, was a good baseball player, but couldn't play football, but loved it. So I used sports as a metaphor for my life. So winning became something that I wasn't doing. So I wanted to study winners. And I happened to get on, I got lucky after being a Navy pilot. I got a chance to work with the Apollo program, and I saw some winners there who were astronauts, and they were practicing and pretending. Then I really got lucky and became chairman of psychology for the United States Olympics. So that way I was able to develop a NASA type, astronaut type mental training program for Olympians for 3 Olympiads. So 4, 8, 12 years, was able to do the Miracle on Ice at Lake Placid in 1980 when we beat the Russians, impossible as it was. And I was able to go there as chairman of psychology and watch Herb Brooks as a coach do his magic with this ragtag team of guys that hadn't been picked up by the National Hockey League as being superstars. They were team players and young, and they were excited and motivated, and they were good, but they didn't have big egos. And the Russians came in with big sticks and big egos, and they had beaten America 10-2 in Madison Square Gardens, and they just came in, and the young guys just skated around them. So what got me hooked was I wanted to have a brand. And the brand to me, I wanted to be a guy that studied winners, who wanted to be a winner, who went from POW, prisoner of work, prisoner of wishes, prisoner of war studies. So I studied all the prisoners of war and worked with them. And I wanted POW to mean POW, or power of women, or psychology of winning. I wanted it to be an acronym instead of negative, to be positive. And that's why I had such a hard time selling the psychology of winning, because they thought psychology and winning was a psychology today college subject. They didn't think it had much of a motivating title, because you'd have to be diving deep psychology. Who wants to get the psychology of winning? I want to get the power of winning. I want to get the winning. I don't want the psychology of it, because it takes 4 years to get a degree. So that's the metaphor. So I worked with POW. It became my brand, and I've stuck with that all throughout my career, either psychology of winning or seeds of greatness. So I'm either building winners or planting seeds, and that's about all I can handle in a career. So that's a good thing. So focus precedes success. You must brand yourself, and you must have your story that relates to other people, but not copy somebody else's story, because there are too many wannabes and lookalikes who are saying, okay, if Zig Ziglar gets down on one knee, or if Tony Robbins wears all black and jumps up and down, I have to be like Tony or Zig, or I have to be like them. And no, you have to be authentically you. You have to be your way of telling your story, which relates to their story.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. That's brilliant. And you do have an amazing story. As a fact, as you mentioned, working for Apollo and the Olympics, in addition to all the other things you did. I mean, there's just so many little details of your life story that just add up. We're going to talk about The Secret in a little bit. I mean, it's just amazing that you've been a part of so many of these really very cool things, just very important things.
But
So,
it's like you though, if you're aware, in other words, let's say that you want to be successful.
Mhm.
So you get very aware of people who are successful, and you develop success by association. So it doesn't just happen. So with me, I had to meet Dr. Jonas Salk, the developer of the first polio vaccine, by accident. But was it by accident, or was it because I was open? And when I met him, I was open enough to know that there was maybe it was the awareness of it. And that's what makes you successful, is being ready for success when it happens to come in front of your eyes, because you're always looking for success. I think you get what you come for. So when you go to a meeting, you get what you come for. If you expect it to be dull, it will be. If you expect to be excited, it probably will be. So your expectations are your motivation. And I've always expected to run into opportunities. I've always expected that. And for some reason, my luck has been really good.
Why do you want to win, Dr. Dennis?
The only reason I want to win is to build other winners. I don't want to win to stand in the winner's circle and be for the moment. So the moment of success, the victory, the wearing the gold medal isn't what I'm looking for in life. I'm looking for the inner applause of doing something excellent, of outperforming my own expectations of me, of planting a shade tree for somebody to sit under after I'm gone. That makes my life relevant. So winning is important to me because my why is to build winners. So my why is not to be a winner, to be a champion, to be rich and famous. It's to help others alive. It's to make a difference in one person breathing easier as a result of me passing their way. What I want people to say to me is, you know, I like me best when I'm with you, Dennis. I don't know why. It's just when I'm with you, you ask me a lot of questions. You're interested in me. And I don't bear back and forth, right? You're really interested in paying you for it? Yes. I can't keep what I have. It's called knowledge and experience. I can't keep it because if you die with it, you'll be like the pharaohs in Egypt. So whatever I earn or whatever I learn, money or knowledge, must be shared in order to be meaningful. So I have to give all my money away before I die in order to feel relevant, because why would I want to take it with me or have relatives fight over it? So I want to give back the money that I've earned to make the money worth something. And I also want to give all the wisdom and mistakes away so that they don't have to make them themselves. And that means my life was worth living. So I think by sharing my bread with others makes me feel that I'm helping. That's why I want to win.
That is a brilliant, brilliant answer. Thank you, Dr. Dennis. I want to move into the secret now. So Larry King called you, I listened to one of these interviews. I played it before on Clubhouse. He called you one of the brightest people he knows. Why do you think that the movie that you were in called The Secret had such a major impact on so many people? So if we can talk about The Secret a little bit, and I know you mentioned Earl Nightingale. And by the way, I'm sorry to machine gun you with questions, but the correlation between Earl Nightingale's book, audio about his version of The Secret, is there any connection to The Secret itself as well?
I think there would be, because The Secret is based on the law of attraction. So let's take the strangest secret is we become what we think about most of the time. So thoughts become things. So focus that it was able to become a reality by the other people who had the tools. You have to have the designer, the architect, the guy with the hammer. So if you're going to build a building, you need to get the building in mind. Then you have to get a drawing of it. And then you have to begin to put the rooms together. So you have to go through the steps of imagining something before it can become a reality. So when Rhonda Byrne came up with the idea for The Secret, she was a television host in Sydney, Australia, and her daughter Sky gave her the book, The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles. The science of getting rich is all based on the law of attraction. You're throwing out to the universe, which is really people. You're throwing things out to people all over the world. And however you can communicate to them, if they hear, ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find. So you need to tell the world what you want, and the world will hear you, and there will be those who will give back to you that them enough value for them to reciprocate. So the missing ingredient is one thing to throw out what you want to be attracted to, but you have to, the law of attraction takes a lot of action. One television program one time at the same time throughout the world, because she thought that the energy of that would tap into the universal energy. So this was a mystical type of program. It was like, it was when Dan Brown came out with that wonderful movie with Tom Hanks in it. What, you know, the movie I'm thinking of?
Yeah, I can't remember the name though.
Well, no, it's the one, because that's where the mystical part. You had to have a best-selling book and a best-selling movie in order for The Secret to tap into that. So it was the DaVinci Code.
Oh, DaVinci Code, yeah.
So The Secret came out shortly after the DaVinci Code. The DaVinci Code was this secret mystical power that if you could find the genie with the lamp and rub the genie, the secret would come out of that. Her timing and her message was so on target. So I did one of the audio that said, since the beginning of recorded time, there's been a secret that only a few have had, but that secret of the few has been their power over the many. And if you had this secret, you would have all the riches in the world that you would want. But instead of doing it as a one-off video, she found that the time zones were such that it didn't work that way. So she did a video CD, a video, and they went out like hotcakes because that trailer was one of the most powerful trailers that I've ever seen it. Then that attracted each of us to want to speak. So all the speakers on The Secret were attracted by the trailer. And the trailer was done before the speakers were attracted. And then all these speakers came on, who you know, all the great people. And Rhonda invited me as well. But she got that from The Science of Getting Rich, which is based on the law of attraction. And then she wrote the book afterward. And so it became a phenomenon. And I think it was so powerful because it finally clicks with people. You got to rehearse it and practice it and be it before you can do it. You know, winning is from within. It's an inside job. It's not an external pep talk. It's not something that is offered to you. It's something that you must be seeking, talking, thinking about every moment of your life. If you want to be successful, it's a magnificent obsession that you're constantly thinking and aware. And then when you're talking about it to everyone you meet, you're going to intersect somebody who says, you know, I can introduce you to somebody, or I had the same idea, or why don't we? And the next thing you know, you've got this thing happening that is based on a serendipitous thought, but it wasn't serendipitous, was it? Because it was part of your magnificent obsession of why. Why do you want to make money? I always ask people, why do you want to be rich and famous? By providing what service? Are you going to save people time and money? Are you going to make them healthier? Are you going to make them laugh? Are you going to make them cry? Why do you want to be rich? Well, because if you're rich, you have power. I said, but you can't buy another moment of life. So you have to be healthy and have time. So time and health become even more important than the money. So you don't want to spend all your time and your health getting the money, because then with the money, you can't do the things you wanted to do. You have to give it away because you can't go helicopter skiing when you're 80. So you have to make your money earlier and become financially independent as early as possible, because that way it'll free you up from the tyranny of the urgent. And if you get financially independent, it's only fuel. It's not status. Doesn't mean anything. Toys don't mean anything. You can play with a certain amount, but you only need the fuel, the library. You only need so much. You need to know when it's enough, unless you happen to be obsessed with the idea of economics. That money becomes so important to you that it's just something you love to do. You love to make money. I mean, that's the fun of it. That's the passion of it. There are a few people like that, but not many, because most people want the money for the power, the prestige, and what it will buy them. But unfortunately, you can't invent more minutes. So you can't buy more time with money. You can have time saving ideas, but you can't save anything that has happened for tomorrow. It's already spent in its current time. And that's another thing that your audience should learn from me. I have a very short bucket list, and I have this list that says, I think it, I see it, I do it. I don't put it on this big list for next year. No, not now. There may only be tomorrow. There may only be today. And with that sense of urgency, a sense of nowness, it makes you really focus on what's important. But you don't do it until you've already passed this incredible period of time when you should be in the moment every day. So what you and I are doing right now should be really fun for us and important for us and important for the viewer. So let's get back to the questions so we can.
Okay. And we're gonna talk about money. We'll get to that. I want to just build my way up. So the seeds of, okay, I'm sorry, going back to The Secret. So
Yeah.
you think that Rhonda, well, let's step back. So Earl Nightingale made The Strangest Secret. Was that was the name of his number one audio book?
1956. So that's so Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie. You look at all the soothsayers from before, they're all saying that you have to visualize it before you can internalize. Even Maxwell Maltz, Maxwell Maltz wrote Psycho-Cybernetics, and he likened the mind to a homing torpedo. And so the homing torpedo is, you must put a guidance system in and visualize where the torpedo is going in order for it to hit the target. And when you have a moving target, you need a navigational guidance computer. You need a GPS. So today, we actually have a goal positioning system inside. It's a GPS. If you crank into your smartphone where you want to go, very specifically the address, but you have to crank in where you are right now, very specifically where you are. And if you know where you are and know where you want to go, you get there. But if you're nebulous and you don't know where you are and you don't really know what it is, you'll go off, you'll wander around aimlessly, maybe self-destruct, maybe have permanent potential. So you got to have a GPS in your mind. And that's why thoughts become things, because you've been given one of the greatest human things, but beside a spirit. You've been given the ability to be different from how you were born and how you were raised. You don't have to become the genetic uniform that you were put in when you were born. You can become something different. And that is truly human and is one of the most incredible abilities we have, to seek and find, to take our imagination and internalize it and make it be real. I mean, it's the most incredible ability to conceive. How do they say? You conceive, believe, achieve, or you imagination plus repetition plus internalization equals realization. The mind cannot tell the difference between a vivid rehearsal and the real opening night. The applause of the audience does not make the difference. The dress rehearsal as far as the person doing it is opening night. The astronauts' rehearsal was going to the moon because they had to be there in simulation before they could be there in realization, or they never would have attempted. It would have been too dangerous, too fearful, too impossible. And that's why everything we do has to be clearly detailed, imagined before you really have the courage to act on it, because otherwise it becomes really just pie in the sky.
That's a brilliant point, Dr. Dennis. I just want to conclude this real quick before we move on to the next question. So just in summary, in 30 seconds or less. So the Napoleon Hill, who basically was hired by Andrew Carnegie to go and interview everybody, hit the lineage to all this from him forward to you and to the present is a straight line pretty much where it connects.
There is, and with Earl Nightingale too, you know, because Earl learned from Napoleon Hill, of course, and Earl learned from Dale Carnegie. And so Earl was old enough to really be really mentored and impressed by people like Napoleon Hill. I mean, he didn't have to just read Think and Grow Rich. He read all of Napoleon Hill's work. And so they all got turned on by their predecessors. So the river runs to the ocean, and that's the same river that's going. Thoughts become things, becomes the watchword. It becomes. So Rhonda Byrne was right on it, you know, with The Secret. There's no question. Thoughts.
That's where I'm going to. Like Rhonda Byrne's The Secret was the end tail of this.
Yep. And it really opened the world because it went viral globally. I mean, it's still going viral in some of the developing countries. I mean, I go to a developing country and they have me sign Rhonda's book because I'm in it. So I'm so tired of signing her book.
That's funny.
Because believe it or not, none of us got any royalties for any of that. So each of the speakers who became teachers made money with their teachings, but they didn't get money from Rhonda, or we didn't get royalties from the book or from the video. But I decided not to make it a money maker for me because I like to be really cerebral and I like to get the facts because I'm more of a POW astronaut kind of guy. So I'm not as much into the mystics as some, but it's really good stuff. It's good.
Well, not that you needed it, but you got great branding from that too, just to say you're part of this.
That helped. That helped. But a lot of people just didn't know. They said, "Oh, were you in The Secret?" And then they have to go back because you know you really have to be on TV. Like when I was on Larry King with Tony Robbins, they knew who he was, but they didn't know who I was. So Larry King, in the interviews, thought that I was bright but he didn't know that much before. He had to interview me so I could be on the show. And Tony Robbins was talking about firewalking. And I mentioned that you wanted to use the right kind of wood to be able to walk on the firewalking because you can't walk on hot coals. You can only walk on soft ashes. So you have to be capable of doing what you want to do. You can't do something impossible. You can only do things that are possible. So one thing Dr. Salk taught me is don't tell people they can walk on water. Only the Messiah could do that. You need pontoons, Dennis, to walk on water. So try to let people do what's possible for them, but don't give them impossible things and tell them that there are these miracles that are constantly happening. So I've tried not to be a miracle worker, even though I know that miracles happen every day. I know they do. I know people meet each other, not by coincidence, but by the law of attraction. But I'm not capable of explaining that in a rational way. I can only explain visualization, simulation, internalization.
Dr. Dennis, just a quick point on that. Dr. Bernie Siegel was on my show a little bit ago. He was on the podcast too. I'm still trying to figure out how he fits in the lineage, and I think only you can really answer this question. Like, because I know that Love, Medicine, and Miracles, which took off, he was the medical doctor that really talked about this stuff. and proved from his patients everything that The Secret and Napoleon Hill was talking about with his The Secret, right? His version of The Secret. Where does that lineage come from? He never read Think and Grow Rich. He didn't even know about it. So I mean, he knew about it.
No, but there are a lot of books before his on the same subject. In fact, the biggest New York Times bestseller was called The Anatomy of an Illness as Perceived by the Patient by Norman Cousins. So Norman Cousins had the best-selling book about using your mind to overcome the disease. He had a disease that was death-threatening, and he watched comedy and watched videos and began to internalize the disease going away and becoming well. So they're psychologically, in fact, there have been many books like that. The Mind is Slayer, Mind is Healer. The Mind-Body Effect by Herbert Benson of Harvard University preceded Bernie Siegel. But Bernie was right on because, and so has Gerald Jampolsky, who took children who were cancer patients and had them visualize the little Pac-Man eating the cancer. So Bernie, being the love doctor, they all came upon the idea that prayer and love and the thinking about the outcome, visualizing the outcome that you want, actually changes the nature inside. So it's both a visualization, but it's also biochemical. So people like Bernie, who are MDs, and people like I really like to use The Mind-Body Effect by Herbert Benson, because that was one of the New York Times bestsellers in the preceding years from Bernie's book. That was he was a Harvard psychiatrist, and he was at the top of his game. He only died a few years ago, and he was one of the most prominent psychiatrists who said that both prayer and thought and visualizing the healthy body would create a chemical reaction inside that would bring about the condition that you wanted, biochemically as well as electrically, as well as energy. And so the visualization is a powerful chemical reaction as well. And I've caught that too, because I want to create dopamine. I want to get my endocrine system. I want to get my immune system up. And the way to do that is use the chemistry of thought to bring the chemicals. And Bernie is, to me, the top of the game, because he was able to put that in a way that people could understand. Herbert Benson's book was a little more psychiatrist oriented, but Bernie was right on. And I think the people like Rhonda Byrne, Bernie, and I can mention a whole bunch of them who were able to put complex concepts into easy to understand metaphors and examples and storytelling are the best. And so I would put him right up at the top. So he fits in the same river that way.
He was reading the books. He probably didn't know it, but he was reading the books written by people who read Napoleon Hill. And,
yes.
Right?
Yes. He was reading.
That's what I thought.
The other side of that. He was reading the more medical side of those. And there are so many studies that, in fact, Harvard now has a placebo. Harvard University has a placebo operating center where they pretend they're operating on your knee. And yet you're as well as when you pretend you're operating on the knee is when you get the knee operation. So there are cases when your belief that you're being healed is just as powerful, and that's called a placebo effect, which means I shall please. So the brain is attempting to please your thought, good or bad. So whatever, even if you're thinking the negative, it's trying to please that negative thought to give you the negative result that you're thinking about. So a fear is a goal going in the opposite direction. And that's mind-blowing to me. So it is the same river, and it probably comes from not only, how about Chinese philosophy 5,000 years ago? You must eat bitter to taste sweet. Or how about sowing and reaping? Or how about the fool talks a lot, but the wise person listens? I mean, there's so many things that come, you become, how about from the scriptures, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. You reap what you sow. All of these things come down through this enormous wealth of wisdom, and they come at us from ancient mysticism and from Greek mythology, from the scriptures, from the Old Testament, the New Testament. And then you get these people like Napoleon Hill and Earl and Rhonda and Bernie, and you say, wow. And you get the Jim Rohns and the John Maxwell's and people like yourself who can synthesize it and bring it up to the digital age. And in your case, make it available to thousands of people, where you had to go from town to town and sing it or play it on a guitar as you wandered as a minstrel. I think it's just fantastic. And it's the long answer to the short question. Yes, it is the same river.
No, this was very important. I appreciate you digressing for a moment, because we got to capture this history down. I'm like Bernie in the sense that I read books that were read by Napoleon. Like, I read Napoleon Hill, actually, though. I did. He's one of the only guys that I really read in this whole self-development area. So I came in it from the academic door, from finance, and I studied, you talk about investors, Warren Buffett and Peter Lynch and stuff like that. But Think and Grow Rich, I read it, but I didn't go into that whole history. And now that since I met Sharon Lechter and she became my mentor, I'm being exposed to all these people. I didn't even know Tony Robbins was a predecessor to this whole chain here. And it's an incredible journey to find that here comes the intersection back to finance, because Napoleon Hill was Andrew Carnegie's, protege. He
That's
basically, right? So that it comes back to money now. So wait a minute, the richest guy in the world taught him and gave him the keys to all these people to go interview. And how come I didn't understand the rest of that river that you talk about? So I'm loving it.
It's because but you were in finance, and so I was in the military. So I mean, I had to just remember, I was raised during radio. There was no television when I was a boy, so your library card became more important than a MasterCard. So I read a book a week for 40 years. So a book a week for 40 years, I began to read all the self-help books, and when I met Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins was selling tickets. So Tony Robbins was Jim Rohn's ticket salesman and sold more Jim Rohn tickets than anyone. 6'6" with red suspenders, a powerful speaker. He synthesized everything from Jim plus his own studying, and he came up with his Tony Robbins version of what he had learned from Jim Rohn. So Tony always gives Jim Rohn credit as being a significant mentor, but I actually watched them together when Tony was only 19 years old. So I saw Tony before he became the Tony Robbins. He saw him on his journey, and he's powerful. He's had an enormous impact on the personal development movement because he's opened everybody's eyes. He's the movie star in our profession.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Dennis. Appreciate that. All right, I want to get back on track so we can stay within a reasonable time. Figure about 1 to 2 minutes for this. So what is more important, to be adored by the masses or to be respected by only one individual?
Well, I think to be respected by those who look to you for leadership. So I would say having the respect of your spouse or your significant other and your family. The respect of a child would be more important than the adoration of the masses. So that would be much more important to me, to have my children respect me for being a man of integrity, than it would be to be rich and famous.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. All right, and what is the significance of sports? Now, the reason I'm asking this question, because you have a fascinating a side track to your career. You went in and were the main guy for psychology for the Olympics, and you got to actually see people, different sports in Olympics. I remember watching an interview with Nelson Mandela, and he was so passionate about sports. And to paraphrase him, I can't quote him exactly, but basically he was talking about how important sports is for humanity to keep us civilized. And he was a former boxer. So when I heard you talk the other night about sports and being the Olympic psychology head, I started to wonder, maybe there's a correlation here between what Nelson said and what you think. So what is the importance of sports for humanity?
Well, I think the important thing is that sporting events are a microcosm of human nature. In other words, there are winners and losers. There is a victory. There's the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. On any given day, you can have a good day or a bad day. You can have a terrible golf game or a good golf game. And sports is what we wrap life around. So it's very easy for us to identify with our team. Just watch a football game and watch the people who are watching their team with their representative of their life on the playing field down there. They're actually projecting themselves. And when somebody scores a touchdown, they do high fives themselves as if they themselves were the one that did the event. So there's a correlation between heroes and heroines in life when we see people do spectacular things that we ourselves would love to do. And that's why we love rock stars and we love movie stars, because they epitomize this fascination that we have with people who make great achievements, like Hercules, for example. It's a Herculean effort. So the metaphor is there for our lives that are represented by the victory, overcoming and winning in the last the 2-minute drill, kicking the field goal in overtime and winning, that feeling of winning. And then we notice also that people crowd around the winners' locker rooms. And there's only this small interview with the loser, and then they quickly go and hide. So there's this feeling that everyone would like to be a winner in life, or winning for life. And so we identify ourselves, and it's a way to wrap life around in a 60-minute version of life.
Yeah, what makes this question more relevant is this great pandemic depression, what I call it, what's happening right now. I was driving by, I live in Philadelphia, and passed by the stadium. That's where our Eagles play the other day. And I actually waited, I had to go see someone, and I waited I'd say about at least a good hour and a half on the highway, which is extremely unusual for a 5-minute ride. And then I realized, oh, there's an Eagles game on a Thursday night. Crazy. And the people were just like coming out. They were so happy. And when this pandemic hit and people didn't have their sports, they were the complete opposite emotion. You see, most people were miserable, especially people that just they like to gamble. A lot of people were miserable because they couldn't have their sports more than anything. So it makes me wonder and I'm not a sports guy, but I respect it. I have a hard time understanding how they're so passionate about it. But maybe what Nelson was saying, it sounds like what you're saying, is that it's people living vicariously through these people. And this event keeps people sane. And sports kind of stops war, if you think about it like that, because they get to act all that frustration of war and put it in a more organized fashion where nobody really gets hurt.
Well, I think that's really true. And if you think back to the original Olympics in Greece, which I have studied at length, it wasn't just about sports. They did poetry, finance, cooking. I mean, the Olympics of the Greek time, all you got was an olive branch. I mean, all you got was a little olive thing if you won, and you were basically naked. They didn't know who you were or where you came from, because you were not allowed to bring your gold amulets and agulets. So they called it a gymnasium. Gymnos means naked. So a gymnasium is a place where you come with your nakedness, just you, and you compete friendly in all disciplines to have a standard of excellence by which you can measure your own excellence. So the idea of sports is to see how good you are against a standard of excellence, which would be Tom Brady's number of Super Bowls, or how many yards, or so human beings like a measurement of something that shows excellent or success, and they like to measure how far up the ladder they can go. And if we can't play in the arena, we love to watch the game, because we do identify. That's why we do have our favorite player and their number on our jersey, and we put on the mask, or we paint our faces and we pound on the side, and we're right there. It's almost like they're us and we're them. And it's a way for people to let off steam without beating one another, because we're very physical, in nature. And if you don't ride a bike or don't walk or don't jog, we want to get out in the outdoors, and we're competitive, because nature is competitive. Nature does have hierarchies. Unfortunately, it does. And it probably always will, because every living thing wants to reach its potential. That's why that's why in the rainforest, there's that one tree that tries to get up through into the sun, because the sun is what gives it the nourishment. So every living thing wants to reach its destiny. And that's what we're programmed to do, to reach as high or as far as we can. And if we can only reach a certain plateau, then we get our vicarious thrill by superheroes, which is why the superhero movies, which is why we have, we like these beautiful people. They're so good looking. They do everything right. They can dance, they can sing, they can do everything. And we worship them. But it's also nice to do something just for the sheer exhilaration, because we love doing it, and it helps people. It doesn't hurt them. I think you should do anything you want, as long as it doesn't exploit and make people less for what you're doing. So I don't like to come out of a movie feeling worse about myself. I don't like to see so much gore. I know they're frightening me, because it's a human nature to want to be frightened. That's why we ride roller coasters. But I'd much rather come out of a sporting event and a movie feeling good than I would feeling less. And that's why I'm having a hard time understanding some of the negative parts of society today, because I think if we dwell too much on the negative, we become what we think about, right? Mm-hmm. If thoughts become things, we can become the very thing we're trying to come away from.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. Appreciate that. All right, and let's talk about aging. So how important is it for a major influencer to stay relevant as he or she gets older? And to preface that question, there's a lot of, and we talked about this actually earlier before we got on, a lot of rock stars or celebrities, movie stars, and we both know some, I'm sure you know a lot more than me, but people that have gotten in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s, and no one knows who they are anymore. And at one point, they were just completely like at the top of their game. The whole world pretty much knew about them. How did you get from that to this? And many of them are even broke too. So, but not to sidetrack the question.
No, it's a very good question. I think the idea is royalties run out. There are a lot of one-hit wonders. There are a lot of 2-year wonders, 5-year wonders. And what we find is when you're hot, and when you're not, you're not. So when Earl Nightingale took a 1-year sabbatical, 1 year, he never got another call to speak. So you cannot go off the train once the train is running, because if you do, they'll go to the next good thing. So you need to be doing what you're doing and keep doing it as long as it excites you and as long as it fills you full of passion and it's something that is your why, because it inevitably happens to everyone. So let's take John Wooden. Most NCAA basketball championships of all time, just like Tom Brady, never be broken to have 16 or however many he had. And he and I spoke in an arena. He got a standing ovation when he walked on the stage, and he got one when he walked off. They looked at their program when I walked on, but I had to work really hard, and I got a standing ovation when I walked off. And he said, enjoy it while you're under the light, because you'll only be under the light for a little while. He said, Andy Warhol was right. 14 minutes of fame. Just remember, 14 minutes. So he and I went back and had a cup of coffee and a burrito. But remember, he had not been on TV very much. His team had, but he was not known for his face, his looks, and his voice. Neither was I. Even though I got a standing ovation, nobody knew me. I wasn't that famous. We had a cup of coffee and a burrito. Not one person said hello. Not one person recognized us. Not one person asked us for an autograph or said hello. We were only on stage when we were under the light. The lesson there is very simple. You go from being rock star to become somebody who's doing the, what do we call them? The sideshows. You go from the big arena to the small arena, and then you go from Vegas to you go from Vegas to Reno, and you go from Reno to the county fair in Los Angeles, and finally you're on stage at the San Diego County Fair, even though you were a rock star in Vegas and in the biggest theaters in the world. A few people make it, like, not even Elvis made it, and Frank Sinatra made it, and a few of them have, but not many. Believe it or not, not many. There are a few icons that last throughout time, and I think and here's what happens. They stay relevant by understanding what's happening in time. And for me, I mean, I thought Clubhouse was a golf clubhouse. I knew that Amazon was a river, but I wanted to invest in it because when I saw it, I knew that it was going to be huge in the late 1990s. And had I had the 10,000, I'm sure I'd have 5 million more dollars right now, but I didn't have the 10,000. The timing was not right. And when the timing is right, it's not always right. So the point is this: the older you get, the less relevant you become. So your significance in life should be based on your own insignificance in the big picture. You're part of the maestro's orchestra. Understand that. You're not the conductor. You're not even the guy that's standing up there with the lead violinist. You're an oboe player in the 15th row. Maybe you're hitting the cymbal, but you're only one of hundreds of millions of people who are on stage for this incredible journey that you've had in the mortal sense. But you're not likely to be remembered 40 years after you're gone by anyone. I'm the only one that remembers my grandmother, only living person that remembers my grandmother. Wow. And so she's gone into her insignificance except for me, but I think about her every day. Why? Because she planted seeds of greatness in me. So she's someone I loved, respected, and cherished. And at the end, when all is said and done, we have those few people, our friends, our loved ones, the people who respect us and love us, and they're the ones that we're surrounded with when the circle of life is completed. Not the millions of adoring fans. Sometimes it happens, but that's usually when we die young. It's usually when we die young that we get the big crowds that turn out because our life was taken away from us. But usually later on, like, I don't know how many people were at Frank Sinatra's funeral. I believe that it was his family. And when Sean Connery died, it was just 4 people. And yet he was 007. He was one of my favorites, even more than Daniel Craig, because he was my 007. So this seems to be the way it works. And what it does, it creates a sense of humility, a sense of confidence and grace, a sense of not getting upset when things don't go right, because you realize, hey, I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing it to see how good I can be against my own values, my own standards. I don't have to base it on other people's opinion of me. And I just don't want to hurt people, okay? I don't want to exploit them and take advantage of them. I want to be real. I want them to say to me, not only I like me best when I'm with you, but I want to say to them, I'll make you glad you talked to me. And then say, why should I be glad that I talked to you? You're just trying to get money out of me so you can make more money and be more famous. No, actually, I'm not expected to be paid for what I'm doing with you today. My payment is in what you do with what we've shared. I want you to say to me, I like me best, and I want to say to you, I'll make you glad. That's all. To me, that's it. As long as I can do that and make a life breathe easier every day, hey, it's been a good day. But if I've been mean and I can't tell you the number of times that I've made assumptions about somebody, but they were in a bad place that day, and I took that as being a judgment of me, and I made an assumption that was totally wrong and negative about somebody. That's why I don't hate anyone who's ever lived. Well, I may hate Adolf Hitler a little bit, but that hatred is not something that burns inside of me like vengefulness. So I don't hate anyone now living at all for any reason. But I am disappointed, I'm sad, but there's no hatred inside. You know, people could be better, they're all flawed. That to me is what happens when you get old. And it happens to everyone. It happens to everybody. It even happens to your grandchildren. They have more important things to do, even though they hang on every word. My grandchildren said, I want to live with you, not my parents. I like you better than mom and dad. I said, no, wait a minute. You don't love me more. You love me differently because I spend more time with you than they were able to. So because I give you my time, you give me your love. And I listen to everything you say. I got the time. I didn't have time then, sorry. Didn't have time with my kids. I got time with you. I got more time with my great-grandchildren. Why? I don't have to earn it all now. Now I can just spend time giving value, not necessarily having to get paid for it. So that's bottom line. That's really important for me to know, because that keeps my self-worth based on things that are real, not based on things that are virtual. And so I don't need to know how many people like me or following me right now, although it's really important to increase your audience, because if you want to influence people, you need to have something that they need to hear. They're going to dip out of my room in the oh, who is that? Oh, that's just the maid. That's the housekeepers who are here. I heard they're gonna go out of my clubhouse as quick as they come in, unless I'm saying something that is beneficial to them. I can speak all day long about what I've done, what I've accomplished, how much money I've made, how many people I've met, Ronald Reagan, a friend. I could drop names big enough to make holes in the floor. It wouldn't mean anything to a person trying to get something that will benefit his or her life. And that's why I really want to edify you, Dr. Finance, because what you're doing is you're creating an ability for people who want not only to be financially independent, which will probably be one of your last questions, but to be self-respecting, to be somebody who has their own self-respect for not depending on other people for their livelihood. I mean, that's an important factor in life, not to be dependent, to be empowered instead of entitled. I'm not entitled to anything except hopefully freedom of choice and thought, but I'm not even entitled to life unless I take care of my body. So, it's not something that I'm empowered by what I'm learning, but I'm not entitled to anything based upon who I am. I'm just entitled to a fair shake. So I want to edify you as being a thought leader.
Thank you, sir.
And someone who is reaching out, and you have a big platform, and the bigger the platform, the better. So I'm hoping that no one takes me as being this guy that doesn't think it's important to have an audience, to have a brand, to have a following, to be able to be relevant, because in your short span of 14 minutes of John Wooden and Andy Warhol, you do have to have people listen to you and pay attention to you. Otherwise, you might just as well plant a garden and love your roses.
And Dr.
Because-
Dennis, sorry to interrupt you, but what do you think, like you talked about Elvis Presley and, Frank Sinatra. Let's go back, even let's take Leonardo da Vinci or even Jesus, okay, 2000 years ago. What does it take to be relevant? Let's take this conversation and just like a minute or under, take it to an extreme. What does it take to be relevant for 100 years, 500 years like Da Vinci, or 2000 years like Jesus? What does it take for some of these celebrities to really live longer? I mean, some of them, as you said, don't even live 40 years and they're already gone. Nobody knows their name.
Well, I think you have to be impassioned about making some kind of change, and you have to have an imagination that is looking that you have to be, I think, pretty much of mostly optimists are the ones that are covered. A few pessimists are, but mostly optimists who have an imagination about the world being better. They're very curious, they're very childlike, they maintain a constant curiosity, and I think, and they get a little bigger thing in their Wikipedia. So remember, there are hundreds of millions of people that have never heard of Da Vinci. There are nearly 1 billion people who will never hear of. I mean, we're talking about 7 billion people on the earth, and 98% of them have never heard of any of these people and never will. So it's only a small percentage of the people on earth who read and who listen and watch, and the rest of them are just trying to eat and trying to get through the day. So this idea of fame and fortune is an illusion. It's actually a mirage on a desert. And the mirage is that you're going to have a legacy, but you need to live a legacy because you won't leave one necessarily. And that's the truth of the matter. So I think immortality is really based on how much love and how much service and how much help you've given. You can be immortal for being a terrible person because you can have killed millions of people and turn the world upside down. You can be known for that.
Yeah.
But those people in Africa and in the developing countries don't know about any of them. They just know where their plight is of the day. And so they only know about eating and drinking. And that's why when I go to Africa, I throw bottled water out so that that kid can get a drink. And I'm planning things in Africa right now, and I'm digging wells because I want to help people who are really impoverished. I want to help people who aren't going to get something to eat the next day in their country, or not even water. If I want to know what lives matter, I'm going to where the source of the most impoverished area is, and I'm spending my time and money helping them, because that's what I do with my money, because I can't give them much time because I'm too old. So I can give them a well and I can give them a garden. But other than that, I can just give them money so they can get education. So that's what I mean about relevancy. I think those people aren't well known. They're only well known by a few, but they have been difference makers. And that's why they have a Wikipedia that's 6 inches long rather than 4. Or when you Google them, their name comes up. Many times when you Google somebody, there's 50 names that are spelled the same way. And you have to look at them before you can identify when you Google somebody. So even being on the internet for posterity doesn't necessarily mean that you're ever going to be noticed again. So that is an illusion as well. But it is important to be found. When you're searched, you need to be found, because when people are seeking what you have to offer, you have to be up there with a presence. So you have to be on LinkedIn, you have to be on Facebook, you have to be on Clubhouse, you have to do your live time, you have to do it. And people like me who don't, their history even faster than I am. So I need to stay relevant. I need to learn. I keep reading, keep learning, keep breaking it so that I can fix it, keep breaking it so I can fix it. If it ain't broke, break it. But I'm no longer in my comfort zone. And here's the last point. I think this is probably really important. I've been told by my neurologist and by all the greatest physicians in the world, if I behave like I'm 75, I'm 88, I'll be 89 in June. I'd rather behave at 65 but my children will soon be that age. So I don't want to behave the age of my children because I might want to date somebody as old as my daughter. And so I'm behaving right now in my early 70s. So I'm walking like that. I'm thinking like that. I'm planning like that. But I'm really planning like a 65-year-old. What am I going to do for my next career? What do I need to learn? Where are we going to go? And I'm already planning, let's see, in 2022, I can tell you where I'm going. I'm going back to Kenya. I'm going to help the game wardens there. I'm going back to the Sea of Cortez because I love the wildlife there. So I've got my trips planned. I've got my bucket list going. I've got what I'm going to do the rest of this week, and I'm excited about what's coming. I'm having a reason for staying relevant. If you don't use it, you lose it. Ability to walk, ability to talk, ability to think, ability to reason, ability to see. If you don't walk for a week, it takes you a month to have to learn how to walk again. I know that for what I've been through. If you're in bed for a week, you got at least a month to 2 months to recover for being in bed for a week. That's the way it works in life. And boy, that's why I'm going to use the body to stay young as much as I can. I'm not granted that, but I'm going to stay that way by thinking that way.
Thank you, Dr. Denis. I appreciate that. I'm actually considering maybe just take a segment of what you just said of how to stay relevant. And if celebrities throughout the world and major leaders were just to listen to that, I think that could change a lot of people. Just to think about, like, you know, even if you're the most famous people in history, you know, there's still a way to keep yourself real.
Well, you're going to get, if you're a beautiful model or a beautiful actress, very soon you'll become the mother of a beautiful actress in the next film. That is, if you want to stay as young as you are in front of people. So we're all going to become character actors at some point, or stand-ins, you know, so we're not always going to be the headliner.
Thank you, Dr. Denis. I'm just realizing we still got a lot of questions. I got to figure out a way to get this in. So maybe 30 seconds for each, if that's okay. And how much time do you have? I want to make sure that you're okay.
Maybe about 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So
shorter answers are better.
Yeah. All right, good. So let's do that. So 30 seconds, what are your best tips for how to live a long quality life?
The best tips are, of course, to hang around young people, to always be curious and not think you know everything, when you're going straight, you're not pedaling. You only pedal on the way up, you coast going down. Always be learning something new. Only by learning something new do you keep your mind active. So that's the way you stay in the game, is by constantly studying biographies of people who've overcome enormous handicaps to become successful. Become a constant lifelong learner.
Thank you, Dr. Denis. And can you summarize in 30 seconds the impact Jim Rohn had on your life? Because I know that you did a speech for him after he passed.
Why, you mean why I love Jim Rohn so much?
Yeah.
I love Jim Rohn because he never held up a bag of his product for the day and never tried to sell himself. The biggest commercial pitch Jim Rohn ever did is say, I really like this one. Maybe you're going to want to write this down. But he had his flip chart and his reading glasses. He was real, authentic, and he never had a bottom line for something that he was upselling you to as a result. He was an authentic, and people were taking constant notes, and they do to this day. They love the fact that his one-liners have so much in them. And that's why I really model myself more after the Jim Rohn type of speaker.
Thank you, Denis. And we talked about Earl Nightingale already in several different questions, but can you just summarize in maybe 30 seconds or less the impact that he had on your life?
Well, first of all, he had a big, deep, booming voice. He had a radio voice because he was a radio commentator, but he read so much, and he was able to take thoughts become things and give examples that resonated with me. So he was somebody that when he talked into a microphone, it was like he was talking only to you. He was able to talk to me directly rather than just give a talk. That's the profound impact he had.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. Now, I didn't know this, but Victor Frankl, you mentioned in Clubhouse, was your mentor. And I'm a big fan of Victor Frankl. I put his quote on my last book right here, The Survival of the Richest. His quote is actually right at the top. And if you see those well, hold on a second, right here you go. See those pictures, that there's two pictures at the top. One is when I was in Hiroshima, I took a picture of the dome that's still standing. And the other one is a picture inside Auschwitz. I went to the camp a long time ago when I lived in Europe. And the quote matches Victor Frankl's quote, which says, since Auschwitz, well, I don't have the copy here, but basically about Auschwitz and Hiroshima, telling us how much is at stake right now. So I really am a big fan of Victor Frankl. You actually had him as a mentor, as a professor, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, Dr. Jonas Salk, the developer of the polio vaccine, which is a whole story about the polio pandemic that we had. You know, we couldn't go swimming in a swimming pool or go to the theater for 4 summers in a row. So we had 4 summers of polio where it ruined our summer vacation. Nothing like the pandemic, though. So Salk introduced me to Abraham Maslow, Victor Frankl, Carl Rogers, all the big thought leaders of that time who were scientists. So Victor Frankl became a visiting professor at United States International University. And so I went over and took his course. And his course was about Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag. And Victor Frankl, of course, wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and he was in both Auschwitz and Dachau. I visited both of them. And so Frankl was talking about logotherapy, which is having an obsession to live. Having logo, meaning what's your logo, your brand, your goal, your why. And he struck me so much because he said that the why is so important in life that if you were a survivor of Auschwitz and you were there in the stench in the worst place, and you took your last piece of bread and broke it in half and gave half away, you would live longer than if you ate the whole piece. And I thought to myself, how could you live longer by eating half as much? It's because you were taking responsibility for another life in addition to your own. In other words, you weren't just self-preserving, you were helping other people live. And that why of being somebody who's serving the needs of others means that you don't focus so much on what you lack, you focus more on what you have and what you can give. That's why he said there should be a Statue of Responsibility on Alcatraz to match the Statue of Liberty in New York. And he gave me the best personal freedom message in 30 seconds. You come in to Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty is given to us by France. They loved our democracy. They loved how free of thinking we were. They envied us. They gave us the statue. We brought in the immigrants. They pledged allegiance. They went up to work at Niagara Falls because it was driving electricity. They all worked their way. They came from every walk of life. Give me, you're tired, you're hungry. And if they did well, they became successful. If they decided to gyp the system, or be, shall we say, negative or unlawful, they ended up at the other harbor. Instead of Ellis Island, they ended up in Alcatraz, a rusting reminder of losing your freedom if you're doing things that are irresponsible. So he said there should be a statue reminding us that personal responsibility is the secret of freedom. Unless you're responsible for the outcomes of your choices could become bad. You could want free stuff. You could want not to pay for it. You could feel entitled to being a winner without doing anything. And then you'd end up either being a communist in the Gulag, like Solzhenitsyn, or being Auschwitz like he was with the other prisoners. He said, anytime you get somebody who has power over you, you lose your freedom. And I tried for years to get the Statue of Responsibility put on Alcatraz. What a dumb idea. A dumb idea because they didn't even know, they didn't want to use it in anything but a tourist attraction. I said, but wouldn't it be great to have an eagle and a baby, and the eagle is freedom and the baby is next generation? They said, oh, you're just a dreamer. So there's been different statues of responsibility, but again, Victor Frankl taught me that it's your why has to be as big as the world. You just want to help other people live a better life, and that makes you feel really good about who you are. I think that's one of the secrets.
Was he in California when
Yes.
teaching? I didn't.
Yeah, he came as a visiting professor. I talked to his relatives since then. So I've kept in touch with the Victor Frankl Foundation and talked about that. And I still have, I should send it to you. I still have, when he died, I cried. I did.
Wow.
I cried when he died. And because he was one of the great heroes who not many people on earth will ever hear of or who ever heard of, but he was right there. And he was where it was happening, and he saw how humans can be the greatest or the worst. He saw both cases.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. Yeah, his book definitely had an extreme impact on my life for sure. That's why I was shocked that when you said that, I'm like, wow. So I guess I was on the right track. But thank you, Dr. Dennis. So I think I want to skip some questions. So obviously, I'm just going to note that you were a Hall of Fame professional speaker. And if we get time, I'll come back to them. You were author of, as you noted, the book Seeds of Greatness. What are your best tips to make a good person great? Maybe in 30 seconds.
Well, I think one is to have a burning passion inside and a belief that you can be better than you are. I think if you believe that there's potential in you, that gives you a passport to take the trip. I think if you don't think you're worth investing in, you won't. So if you're not good enough to be educated, if you're not good enough to be better than you are, then you're resigned to wear the uniform you were given when you were born or where you were raised. So that burning passion inside would have to ignite the fire inside. You actually have to believe that with all your soul. Then you have to say, well, am I confident enough that I can? Oh, of course not, because I haven't done anything to show that I'm confident enough. So you have to take little baby steps and do something successfully locally before you can go regional, national, and global. So you have to have some tiny successes, which means you have to get skills, knowledge. So you have to get knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits. You have to get some knowledge, you have to have the attitude, you have to get some skills, and you have to be habit forming and those good things. So in my case, I read a lot and listened a lot, and that's what I recommend to people. Coaches, mentors, role models, pick them wisely. Pick someone who is most like you, who you could be like, or who you've learned from, and you can connect with in some way, and then read everything you can, learn everything, and then put your own personal stamp on it. Don't try to be like them, try to do what they did in your own way. So I think that would be the second thing, would be to get the knowledge on top of the burning desire inside. And always remind yourself that failure is a detour, not a dead end. Failure is an event, not a person. And resiliency is the ability to bounce back after failure, knowing that they're going to be part of the program. You are going to be disappointed. You are going to be angry. You are going to be hurt. You are going to be human. And to be able to handle those things with the type of resiliency and countenance that you're not getting upset, yelling, screaming, rioting, killing. Maybe that's the only way some people can get attention, but it's much better to get attention by inspiration than by desperation and intimidation.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. All right, so let's see. Think of the most horrible people on this planet, and we talked about this in Clubhouse. You had mentioned Hitler. Maybe in 30 seconds, can you make them great, or is it too late at a certain point?
No, I think they're great failures, but they're great. So they're great at what they do, but unfortunately they've had millions of people die as a result of what they did. So in other words, they're celebrities, They're icons. They're very well known. They'll be remembered throughout history for their bad deeds. It's like Pol Pot, or it's like Stalin, or all of those things. So no, I don't think so. I think we need to recognize that there is evil in the world, and there are people who do bad things for power. So I think power, I think when you shout loud, you're calling for help. So the louder the message, the more help that you need. That doesn't mean the decibels in a rock concert. So I don't mean that. I just mean the people that are pushy, really pushy, and so pushy that they'll push you out of the way, have a lightly valued self that they're trying to promote because they feel so bad about themselves. They need a way to feel good, and the only way is to hurt or dominate other people. You know, many tyrants like to keep people really short. You know, big egos like to keep small people within their power. And that's why I don't like the big ego people who shout for service. I'd rather be an inner winner than an outer shouter.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you, Dr. Denis. Okay, we're pivoting to the money thing. We have one more question left, and then we'll get into that. And it's just, you mentioned this in an interview that I listened to. I thought this was really spot on the money with our society. In our society, where the most bizarre continuously gain the most attention, what is the long-term effect on its people? Now, I'm prefacing with the fall of Rome. So the Roman Caesars got weirder and weirder, and the things that they did got even more extreme. And I know that you probably feel the same way, but if you notice, a lot of our celebrities are getting more and more bizarre. Their messages are getting bizarre because they have to outdo the last person who was already bizarre. What's the end to this? How do we bring people back to, look, ladies and gentlemen, you know, you don't need to curse at on stage. How do we get that standard of connecting to people and talking to people nice back to normal? Like, well, where we go from here?
It's usually a revolution rather than an evolution. In other words, we're devolving right now and going down to the basic thing. And that's the trouble with human nature. Human nature is such that we love to be viscerally stimulated. So think about this. Halloween is a scary time. You're supposed to go through the haunted house and it scares you. And I always wondered this. My great-grandchildren, when I crawl around the back of the sofa, or I'm in the closet and we're playing hide and seek and I jump out at them, they shriek and squeal because it scares them. It almost makes their heart, and they say, do it again. So we ride a roller coaster and it scares us very badly, but we do it again because we love the visceral stimulation of fear in the moment. We like that's the scary movie. And in order to be frightened today, it has to be more viscerally. So there must be more knives and blood and guts. But the scariest thing is when you don't know what's happening and it's the silence that scares you. Your imagination is what should frighten or stimulate you, not the visceral thing that you're seeing or witnessing. So unfortunately, we're needing to be viscerally stimulated more and more. And that is why the octagon, where you're, instead of just boxing and knocking someone out, they love to see the guy bleed and get knocked out in one punch, or maybe he almost breaks an arm. So the octagon becomes the ultimate Roman experience. And we're having more injuries, and football. Football is becoming a lot more injurious simply because people are stronger, faster, they work out more, they're stronger, they're faster, they're taller, they can do the 40 faster, so the impact is greater. The point is pretty simple. A revolution in ideas usually comes when we say, I'm not going to take it anymore. And enough people, enough people with sanity say, let's try to change the metaphor. And unfortunately, the people that control the media truly are trying to make money. And you make money more by stimulation than you do by education. So a movie does not have to have a redeeming quality to it to sell tickets. It can be wham bam. So you can have 100 people die or 10,000 people die in a movie, and it will be viscerally stimulating because it's got lots of action. I think that when people who are artists and artistic look for beauty in a different way, that beauty is not just being having something that is so outrageous that you see it because you don't believe anyone would show anything like that. We went through that stage during the 70s and 80s when we were rebelling against the Vietnam War and against, and the flag had blood on it, and all sorts of things were happening. Christ was being, it was just all kinds of things. Anything that would make people in a organized society worry, they loved, because it was a way to be heard. So I think it's a way that people who are not heard can be heard. The short answer should be, we're going to need a revolution in thinking, and we're going to probably need different leadership. Different leadership for people who want to earn money by helping people notice beautiful things, a beautiful aroma, a beautiful flower, a beautiful piece of art, beauty in life and beauty in nature, rather than the horrors and so we need to flip it a little bit and get a reason. We need more Forrest Gumps. We need more Sound of Music. We need more stories that give us inspiration rather than make us feel less. So I think if people will look for the human potential of being better rather than the natural human who wants to dominate and hurt other people, I think we'll be better off. It's going to take a bottom up. It's going to take family first. It's going to take parents to children, and then kindergarten, and then teachers, and then high school, and then universities, and then the media, then the Google and Facebook, and then it's going to take a little bit of Jeff Bezos, a little bit of the Washington Post and the New York Times, and you're going to take all of this to shift it just a little bit more down the center, rather than swing to the right or swing to the left. And that's not political. I'm apolitical, and I'm not talking as a politician. I just think we need to look at human nurture rather than the base of human nature. We need to nurture rather than live in our nature. We need to live for our nurture.
Thank you, Dr. Denis. A brilliant answer. I appreciate you taking the time for that. All right. We're moving into the finance questions now, and these are all pretty easy questions. I think we could definitely tackle them in 30 seconds each one. What is the best advice that you have for successful people for how to not spoil their children/grandchildren? Because now we're entering the realm of money. And one thing that I saw, I was a former financial planner, retirement specialist right out of college, working for Vanguard. A lot of people, they have a lot of money. And what happens, the theory of the third generation, I don't know if you heard that, the third generations where, someone who was really successful, the third generation of grandkids screw it all up. Well, what's your thoughts on how, because they spoil them, by the way. So yeah. What's your thoughts or advice for successful people, how to not spoil your kids, how to not spoil your grandkids?
That's really good. Well, first of all, there is a cycle, and the cycle is a poor man, hardworking man, rich man, indulged son, lazy son, poor son, hardworking son, and then it goes on the cycle. So unless we pass on to the next generation what it takes to become financially successful, and they have to earn a living. So here's the way it starts. First, it starts with the jars. So a piggy bank, they even know how to file down the thing where you put the coins in, and they can take the cork out of the bottom and get the money out, stick the cork. So a piggy bank, without breaking it, you can still steal money from the future. So the best thing to do is have 3 jars, but that are not glass and breakable. And one of them has no lid on it. And that's so you get an allowance. So if you're a boy or a girl and you're 7 years old, and today they get a lot more, believe it or not, the average American teenager gets 126 to 200 bucks a month, $126 a month average from their parents to live their lives as a teenager in the United States. So they're getting money for not doing anything. What should they be doing? Well, they should be cleaning their room for nothing. What? Why? Because cleaning your room is part of being in our family. So we all pitch in and clean our room. So here's what we do. We put away our toys before we go on to the next toy. We don't clean up after the children's toys when they're 3. So it starts when you're 3. And when you're 3, you put away this before you start this. And you put them in a place so you can get them next time. And you learn to put things away. It's like the kindergarten lesson. And then pretty soon you learn how to put your ducky away when you take your bath, and you learn how to do it with your clothes. And I finally taught my daughter how to take her children's clothes that were piled in the center of the room and thrown around in the dorm and put them in a big basket. And if they were there for a week or 2, she gave them to the Goodwill. So the thing to do is, unless they learn to take care of their things disappear. So that's one lesson, is letting a child fail when the failure does not damage their self-esteem. What does that mean? That means discipline is not punishment. Discipline is learning. And discipline is teaching children how to do things for themselves without expecting the parents to do things for them. So the allowance is put into a jar with no lid on it. They're able to take out part of that allowance and spend it any way they want, because the jar is open. It's their allowance. They're given that much. They're given 50, 60 bucks a week. And that's a lot of money to give. So they take out 1/3 of that, and they spend it any way they want. The next jar has a lid on it, and that's to save for later. So you screw it on pretty tight. And then they put it in there and they say, that's hard to get off. I can't get the lid off no, you say, no, that's for later this year. That's for Christmas. That's for grandma, for her birthday's coming. That's to save for later. That's delayed gratification. And then there's the 3rd jar. And the 3rd jar has a lid that doesn't come off. It just has an entry and not an exit. And you say, what is that jar for? And you say, ooh, that's the future. Well, no, I want to spend my allowance and then spend some for later. But why do I have to pay the future? Because the future will be disconnected unless you pay it as one of the first things you do with the money well, how much do I have to pay the future? Well, at least 10% of your take-home pay. So a little child needs a checking account by the time they're 7 or 8, and they need to understand checking and savings. Even though there's no interest rate that you get on your money in a save, they still need to learn that. So they need to learn how to take their allowance, spend it, save it for the future in little ways. And they learn to tie their shoes rather than have the parents tie them so they can get to school. They learn not to forget their homework so the parent doesn't have to take the homework to school. I can't tell you the number of times that I had to take the lunch of a young toddler because they forgot to take their lunch. So finally I put it by the door. That still didn't work. So finally I came up with the ideal answer to not spoil your kids. We'll be eating early tonight. No, wait a minute. I forgot my lunch. Yeah, ask the teacher for some money. Maybe she'll lend it to you, or get a sandwich or half a sandwich from your friend. We'll be eating early tonight. What did they do the next week? They remembered to take their lunch. Then they began to make it, and they've made a better sandwich than I did. Point is, early responsibilities for each child, not ridiculous responsibilities, but don't pay them for things they automatically should be motivated to do. Cleaning their room, that's part of our family. I showed the kids my room. I said, why do I do it? So I can find it when I want it. So it's not all wrinkled up, I can put it on. The only reason I do it is so I can find it, I can use it. It lasts longer when you take care of it. I bought them cars. The cars were condemned. Why? They only kept them for a couple of years because they didn't polish them. They didn't put the oil in. They didn't get a tune-up. They didn't buy it. When they started putting money in their car, they started taking care of it. They had skin in the game. Make your child have skin in the game of life and make it fun. Give them an allowance. They should have an allowance. They have to have spending money.
And this works even for rich people though, right?
Like, or does it ever? And it works for us who weren't rich for most of our lives. I mean, I spent all the money I made up until I was 55. So I didn't do the things that I'm now telling people to do. I waited till I was 55, and it took me 20 more years to become totally financially independent. But it was a real work to go from 55 to 75 and become financially independent, because then I had to actually do those things with that 20-year period of time that I was trying to teach my children to do. And that is a step-by-step process. It's a no-brainer when you got time and discipline. If you got a little discipline and 20 years, you can be financially independent without having to play that game of gamble. You can do it.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. I was just doing a little calculating though. You were getting paid thousands of dollars to speak on stage, and it still took you a long time to get that.
Oh yeah, because you should have seen the house. My house was 4.5 million. I had horses, I had orange growth, I had a house to die for, just like everybody else does. Just like every physician and every dentist who has to keep belly up to the chair when they're 70 years old because they don't have financial independence. No, earning does not give you the money. It's only what you do with the excess money that you don't spend on lifestyle. So you have to have a spendable income that goes into security and stability and quality. And then you have to have another 10% going into something that gives you at least a fixed income, at least 5 to 7%. And then you compound it over 20 years and you end up with $5, $6, $7 million in a 20-year period. So it took me 20 years from 55 to 75 to get $6 to $8 million. It took me that long, no matter how much I earned. Earning is nothing compared to what you're putting away for the future.
Because your expenses were so high. If your expenses were lower, you would have been there much faster.
The trips, taking children all over the world. Are you kidding?
Hey, you had a good life though, right? You got the.
I took them all over the world. I went everywhere. You know, we had a wonderful life. But I had no money to take care of my elder years because I did not have what? I didn't have something, you know what it costs, of course, now for a person who, like me, who's my age, who comes to live back with you. So you're my son. Actually, you could be my grandson, but you're my son. I tell you that I changed your diapers with your mom, and now I have to come to live with you because I don't have any place to live. I'm 80 years old. I have a heart problem. So what it costs is it costs a minimum of $10,000 a month with a skilled nurse anywhere in the United States that is not a horrible senior center. 10 grand a month, and people don't have the 10,000 a month to spend on skilled nursing for dementia or for any of the really disabling diseases. So they have to take their parents into their home and take care of them for the most important years of their life, the lives when they just had the money to break free, to travel and do the things they want. So there's a book I'm writing called When Parents Become Children Again. And what nobody thinks is they're going to be old and require 10 to 20,000 a month to be taken care of by somebody else. And that is what financial independence means. I don't need my daughters and grandchildren to change my diapers or to help me take a shower. That's the most low self-esteem building thing that could ever happen to a parent, to be in a position where our children see us at the worst points in life, but I can take care of myself. And that is one of the few great things about financial independence. You got self-respect to live out your years in dignity. And you need to plan for that because, boy, is it expensive.
That was definitely a bonus, Dr. Dennis. And by the way, might I add, if you need any endorsements or help with that book, that's right up my alley. So I was a retirement specialist.
I probably would like to have you on that because that's so important. You know, people miss that. They miss the fact that they're most likely to live rather than die. So life insurance is great. And disability insurance is even better because you're more likely to be sick or hurt and have to pay for the bills and still have to pay everything and not be able to earn. So you have to have some disability savings. But then on top of that, I forgot to get care for later in life. I never even thought about that because we all think we're going to be immortal and then we're going to be rich. And so I think financial independence should be on everyone's radar. And I hope you're helping people every day, because is that important? Is it everything? No. Is there enough? Yes. Is there a point where you have enough? Yes. Do you need to have hundreds of millions? No. Not unless you're a philanthropist and really want to make some big changes in the world. Sure, you could do that, or if you just love making money. But boy, enough is enough. And then recycle the money. It makes you really feel good when you're helping somebody who needs it or can use it better than you can.
That's right. Thank you, Dr. Denis. Okay, we're wrapping it up here. These questions should be pretty easy. Can one book change the world? Maybe 30 seconds or less.
Yes. The Old Testament did, the New Testament did, probably the Quran did, probably the Tao Te Ching did, no question about it. Think and Grow Rich did. The Secret could have changed an enormous number of people, but the world is usually done by really powerful thinkers. But yes, I believe a book can change the world.
Thank you, Dr. Denis. What role has networking played in your life in 30 seconds?
Networking is everything. I thought I could do it alone, but I'm not a good marketing. I'm not a good networker. I don't make cold calls well. I'm not good with money. I'm not good at managing people. But networking puts you in a position where you can use your greatest skill, whether it's speaking or cold calling. You can get together with a team, a network of people, and you can have every facet of a team covered by somebody who does better and loves doing what you don't love to do. So networking also is word of mouth instead of word of mouse. So word of mouth means when you recommend something and you're a person that can be, shall we say, respected for the integrity of your choices, and you see a good movie, eat at a good restaurant, have something benefit your health, you give it 5 stars. When you get 5 stars on Amazon, you're more likely to buy that product than if you get a 1 star all the way down the line. So you need 5-star referrals. Networking does that by word of mouth, and everything in life is based on referral and renewal. And it's all done based on somebody recommending it to you, including a new job. So a new job is also based on a network of somebody that you link into to get a new job. So it's all based on know who as well as know how.
Thank you, Dr. Denis. And as an extension of that, is mentoring important, a form of networking? Is mentoring important, and who were some of your mentors, if you care to share?
Mentoring is absolutely vital. Without it, we're an island. We're going on our own instincts only, and we're not masters of everything, of course. My grandmother was the greatest mentor early on. I had a junior high school teacher. I had Dr. Jonas Salk teach me not to tell people that they could do anything. He told me to get the facts, be truthful. He said, you're dangerous. He said, you're very dangerous because you know a lot, but not enough. And he said, you're a very good storyteller, but you tell stories, and so you reorganize the truth. So some of your truth is only an imagination. So he said, so he was a mentor. And so the mentors, Earl Nightingale, him, Jim Rohn, maybe, I learned a little bit from Tony, be a little more demonstrative, learn from Jim Rohn, keep it honest, learn from Earl. You don't have to sell. If you have the real thing, you don't have to flaunt an expensive imitation. Everyone I've read has been a mentor, and I'm a mentor of John Maxwell. So John Maxwell looked at me from the audience and says, oh, there's Denis Waitley, one of my mentors. And I said, oh, John, you're 65. That would make me in my 80s, because I'd have to be at least 20 maybe to be a mentor, but not necessarily. An athlete can be a mentor to me. Wayne Gretzky was a mentor. I said, how do you score so many goals? And he said, I look for the empty part of the net. I said, what? He said, I don't look at the goalie, I look between his legs. I said, oh, you're looking for where you want the puck to go, not where you want it to stop. I got it. focus on where you want to go, not where the obstacle is in front of it. I learned a lot from that. So I learned, and the mentors work into role models and they work into coaches. And a coach is someone who spends time with you, who teaches you and asks you hundreds of questions. And then instead of saying, this is the way I would do it, they would say, well, what were you thinking of doing? Well, what are you doing? Well, did you just do what you said you would do last week? So a coach not only coaches you, but it keeps you accountable and then lets you play. And a good coach lets the player play, which was Don Shula, John Wooden. So a great coach will let you make mistakes and then correct, but he or she will always correct you. This is what we need to do more of. Instead of ranting and raving, saying, you know, you blew it in the second half, you know, that everyone was stupid. The defense played like the offense. I'm humiliated to be the coach of your team. No, they say, where was my Green Bay Packers in the first half? Vince Lombardi would say, my Packers weren't on the field in the first half, but I expect my Packers to be on the field in the second half. And you know better and you know what to do. And so the second half, you're going to go out there and take it to them. Does everyone know what we're going to do in the second half? We're going to play the game like it was the end of the game at the beginning of the second half. Let's go. So instead of, you know, berating everyone, a good coach brings the best out in them. And that's what I think we need more of, coaches.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. We're rounding up the bases here. What are your favorite financial books? Maybe 3 or less.
Well, the Millionaire Next Door. I mean, there even Think and Grow Rich, I would call as a financial book, but I read more I read a lot of the Wall Street Journal. I follow a lot of the major investment bankers. You know, I use Morgan Stanley as my investment banker, but a lot of people use different ones. But I believe in going to people who've been there and done that. I like Warren Buffett a lot for different reasons. I like Warren Buffett because they say, why don't you retire? And he said, what would you like me to do? Like, I get up, make my bed, put my suit on, my tie, and go down to the Omaha office and see what's happening. He says, I like to see what people are buying that will last. I look for lasting value. He said, I really enjoy being on the playing field, so I really don't think, and he said, I'm giving away the rest of the 85 billion. So I like to read books, you know, Michael Dell's book, Direct from Dell. Michael Dell was the youngest billionaire of the dot-com business because he went direct online and customized the laptop according to what you wanted to use it for. And he was able to take an Apple IIe and then sell $21 million a day as the most successful laptop salesman in the world. And it was a billionaire by the time he was 38. Bill Gates made it at 42. But now the guys are making it younger, like Facebook and some of the others are making it quicker. But I look at a billionaire for what it was that they offered that changed the way people buy things. In other words, market segmentation. And so a Direct from Dell was a financial book for me because I found out that he was a guy that always wanted to sell people who wanted what he had to buy. And how did he know that? He was able to go around the doctors and lawyers' offices and find out what they used it for, and then would bring it back to them, made for them. So he made it for you, and then he asked you the questions online through an online tech guy. So I think asking questions and shutting up, finding what the hot button is in a person is so important. But the financial books, I probably should read your books more.
By the way, I definitely would. I invite you. I will talk to you afterwards. I would like to send you a copy of each. So for sure, free of charge, of course.
But some of the great financiers are people that I study. So people who are great economists. I've studied. You know, I mean, I've studied Arthur Laffer. I've studied the Laffer curve. I've studied supply and demand. I know what the people who are supply side and the difference between Reaganomics and Bidenomics. I mean, I look at all that and say, I need to work what's comfortable for me, what I understand. The only thing I now understand is that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. If you got time, you can get there, but you need to have discipline, time, and have the habit of saving. and put it in something where you're not always trying to get rich quick. Get rich slow, step by step. Make sure that you're focused. So that's another thing I've learned about making money. Focus always precedes success.
And speaking of money, Dr. Dennis, do we need money to survive? Maybe 30 seconds.
We need to be able to barter value for value. So if we don't have beads that the Indians, and I don't want to use this as a racial kind of thing, if we don't have something to trade for value, we do need money. And money is a source of exchange with people. And maybe the yuan, maybe the dollar, maybe a Bitcoin next time. But we need something for, we do need a quid pro quo. We need to, and here's my idea: give more in value than you receive in payment, you'll be sought after. But don't give less in value than you expect in payment, they'll find you out. And they'll find out that you're trying to get more from them than you're willing to give to them. Go the other way. If you go the other way, you'll be sought after, and they'll look at you as a bargain. And everyone wants a bargain. They want to buy from somebody that gives them more than their money's worth. That's called customer service, and it rules. Customer retention, customer service rules by the customer feeling, I got something more than I gave you. I got a good deal today for what I got.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. Is finance necessary for everyone?
Yes, it absolutely is. In fact, it's the way life works. That's the way life works. The way it works, loss gain is the way you gain and lose, and every day you're gaining and losing. No matter what you're doing, it's better to try to be a little bit on the plus side. Normally, we can only be about 51%. If we're really lucky, we can be above the average.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. 3 last questions. They should be pretty smooth. This is right up your alley. How important is having a purpose, and what is your purpose?
Purpose is the most important thing of all, because there has to be a why are you alive, or there's no reason to live. And most people give up when there's no more reason to live. That's why you have to be very curious and make sure your purpose is big, meaning helping, serving, creating value, making a plant better, a child better, making something better as a result of you living. So purposeful living, people live and die on purpose. And without a purpose, there's no reason to live. Yes, my purpose is to plant shade trees for future generations under which I myself will never sit, which is why a little stone where I'm going to be just said, he loved his family and tried to plant the seeds of greatness in everyone he met. But my name will not be there, only this little rock where a lover couple can sit underneath the tree and say, huh, that's an interesting saying. So that's it. For me, it's just planting seeds, throwing them out there. Some will take root, others won't. That's okay. As long as I have a few seeds of greatness that have borne shade trees. I may not sit under them, but it's a good feeling to know that a few will.
I love it. That's great. Thank you, Dr. Dennis. And what would you like to accomplish in the next 10 years or so, and why?
I'm writing the book, When Parents Become Children Again. I've got a book called The Psychology of Loving. It's a kaleidoscope book. It's the first book I've ever seen that's a kaleidoscope and a book at the same time. So I'm trying to write things that define what real love is, because it's very difficult to define. It's so different. And When Parents Become Children, I'm trying to make people understand that aging is something that we all face, and other books. So I think what I'd like to do is help younger people at an earlier age get the fire of desire rather than just entrepreneurs. So I'm going to go down in age a little bit to see if I can get down among the Gen Yers or the Gen Zers. And it's not easy because the attention span is really short, which means I have to get shorter answers to the questions. And thank you for trying to keep me on track, because I have a tendency to seminar rather than app. So instead of a smartphone, I'm still playing that long reel of tape in my mind instead of that quick burst of digital information.
No, you're doing great, Dr. Dennis. And considering the technology problems that we have before this podcast began, like, this has been it's been spectacular. And I thank you. I appreciate you so much. One last question, sir. What would you like to be your legacy to this world? Last question.
He loved his family and his family loved him. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Denis. All right. Well, we're going to close out, folks. I hope you enjoyed this. This was definitely a very extensive podcast episode, but I wanted to take the time today because I am extremely honored to have Dr. Denis here. He has such an amazing background that I think a lot of you, if you've been listening to my prior podcasts, when you start to connect the dots, a lot of it leads back to Denis. Like he's, as he said, one of the oldest living, can I say this right, living person in the lineage of Napoleon Hill. And he's seen it all. So I thank you again, Dr. Denis. I appreciate you being here. I want to just turn the floor over to you for a moment. You can say anything you want, talk about your books, where people can find you. So anything you want, I turn the floor over to you. The floor is yours.
No, actually, one of the first responders from 9/11, a fireman who is a follower of mine, called me and he said, I like the audio version of your book better than the book itself, because he said the audio version is right off the top of your head. It's real and it's not scripted. He said the book is great, and I've been giving the book to all the fire chiefs across the United States, but he said, I like the audio version. So the only commercial I would ever give on myself would be the audio version on Audible. Is less expensive and is just as good as the book itself, but it's the New Psychology Winning. It's on Amazon. That's all I'll say. But I don't want to talk about myself or anything like that and what I have to offer. New Psychology Winning, if you learn anything from me, I'm happy to share information. You can find me by Googling me, and so I don't have any addresses to give you. I don't have anything to follow. All I can tell you is that I'm passionate about giving. And there are, Bob Proctor is almost as old as I am. So Bob Proctor is in his 80s, and he's also one of the last living ones in our same age group. And I'm sure there are a lot of people in their 80s and 90s who are wiser. I mean, Betty White. I mean, I know people in their 90s that I look up to right now that are still, they're going strong, and they're walking and running. Some are scuba diving, some are jogging. They're in their 90s. So they're my role models. So, and Warren Buffett is 90, so he's a role model. So there are a lot of people that are my mentors and role models who are living legends of their time, and I'm trying to learn as much for them. So that is, be a lifelong learner and keep the curiosity of a child and never believe you've arrived. And don't look at success as a status, look at it as a process. You'll never be a success, but you will be living successfully, because the success changes when each doctor's visit brings up something new. So success is not stable. It goes like this. And so you look for valleys and peaks, and handle the peaks with all humility and handle the valleys with all resilience and persistence, and you'll be just fine.
Thank you, Dr. Denis. And you're on all different forms of social media too, if people want to follow you. Is that correct? They can find
That's right. They can follow me on Facebook. They can follow me on LinkedIn. They can follow me on Clubhouse. And naturally, Clubhouse is better for me because it's all audio, and I don't have to get caught up so much. And incidentally, yeah, my ring light didn't work. One of the mics didn't work. So I'm still learning. I'm still learning in the digital age. But you have to stay up with. Don't get caught in the backwash. It's really hard to get back out with the big waves, because you got to go through a wave after it's broken. So stay on the leading edge of the wave of change. Don't get late. Don't be late. Be an early adopter. You don't have to be an innovator, but be an early adopter. And when change comes along, get right on it.
And folks, I just want to give
one last thing.
Oh, God, I'm sorry.
So the serenity prayer is the way I live. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I can't change what happened, so I deal with it by having My failures be learning experiences, and my successes are things to hang on to when things aren't going well. I can't live in the future because that's as yet unlived. What I can change, though, is my next thought and action. So whenever things happen to me that I cannot change, I'm courageous enough to change the way I look at it and the way I'm going to do it next time, and make sure that failure is not something I continue to practice. So change the changeable, your next thought and action, and don't make it something you don't want. You cannot concentrate on the reverse of an idea. You cannot come away from something you don't want. You always will move in the direction of your current dominant thought, which is why Napoleon Hill was right. Thoughts become the manifestation as things and people.
Wow,
And that's the end. I've given you everything I know, and everything I know is in fact, I've given you more than I know. I've given you things that I don't know for sure.
And I got to give you an endorsement for Dr. Denis real quick, because the hour I spent before this podcast on the technical issues, I got to watch the way his mind works. He's extremely sharp, and he's a product of exactly what he says. He does what he says. Like, he does keep up with the changes. I can't believe, and someone your age, Denis, I hate to say it, I don't know how else to say it. Someone your age is so good with like keeping up with things. I mean, you knew every button I was talking about. You were right on point. I mean, you're about 30 years ahead of the average person I know. Yeah, you know, around that age. So, I mean, I just want to thank you so much, sir. You just definitely appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me. It's an honor to be on your program, because you have a large following, and you're helping people. You influence a lot of people. So it's my honor and privilege. Just if one person learns something, hey, it's been a great day.
Thank you, Dr. Denis. And one last thing, where's your website? What's your website address again?
It's just www.waitley.com, or the website is really www.deniswaitley with one. I'm Dennis with one N. I'm one of those guys that lost an N. So it's just DENISWAITLEY. But I'm up there. You can Google me and you'll find me that way.
Okay, thank you, Denis. All right, we're going to close out now. Dr. Denis, if you want to just hang on after I close out, I just want to walk you out and say goodbye.
Sure.
So folks, thank you again. You've been watching the Dr. Finance Live podcast. Dr. Anthony Criniti IV, also known as Dr. Finance. Definitely follow, like, and subscribe. Go check out Dr. Denis Waitley at his website as well. My website's right here, drfinance.info. I'm all over social media. You can follow there. This podcast will be broadcasted through all the different podcast forms, plus YouTube, etc. So check that out there. A little about my books. So my first book, The Necessity of Finance, I made for my students over about 10 years ago, published about around that time. And that was my first book just for students as a finance professor. Then we got into the most important lessons in economics and finance. It was an extension of that. I started noticing a trend in a lot of things I talked about was struggle and survival. And I knew that I'm really approaching the subject from a different way. And I thought long and hard about that. And I realized that finance is an extension of survival. And I wrote a 500+ page book as my last major book on that, called The Survival of the Richest. So if you want to read these books, definitely check it out in that order, because they all follow through, build on top of each other. But other than that, folks, thanks again. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate Dr. Denis for being here. And we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye now. Thank you.